Badlands. Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
We were sleeping. I've been sleeping. I've been turning away from a truth I wanted not to face. There is a wound that won't heal at the center of the galaxy. There is a darkness reaching like rust into everything around us. We let it grow, and now it's here.
How many men have you killed, my lord?
I don't know.
50? 100? Countless.
Countless has a nice ring to it.
And how many lives have you saved?
500,000. Population of King's Landing. Tell me if your precious Randy commanded you to kill your own father and stand by while thousands of men, women, children
to lead the Republic. But you were deceived. You assumed no force could challenge you. And now, finally, we have returned.
The visions are clear now. I see possible futures all at once. Our enemies are all around us. And in so many futures they prevail. But I do not hope!
We have survived by hiding from them, by running from them. But they are the gatekeepers. They are guarding all the doors, they are holding all the keys, which means that sooner or later, someone is going to have to fight them.
I wish none of this had happened.
So do all who live to see such time, but that is not for them to decide. All we will have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us.
forgive me. I did not see. I have failed you all.
You fool brain. Captain Armor. I do not know what strength is in my blood. But I swear to
Our people. Our people.
I wish you good fortune in the wars to come. And now it begins.
No. Now it ends.
All right, guys, welcome to The Narrative, episode 49, The Trump Doctrine. I've got the increasingly Wolverine mutton chops going, I guess. Not mutton chops, you know what I'm saying. It's getting animalistic up in the north. My guest and I wouldn't know anything about that. He's living on some island, some tropical island somewhere, I'm sure, pretending that he's got it rough. So tonight's show, I've been joking that we're going to wing it. We are kind of going to wing it, but we're going to wing it in a good way. We know what we're talking about, and I didn't want to get too crazy in the weeds and try to narrow us. We're going to talk about the Monroe Doctrine, the national security strategy sort of memo statement that the Trump administration put out. And I'm sure every show on Badlands is talking about this. I know the boys were talking about it last night. I'm sure my guest tonight and the boys after this show will talk about it. So I want to talk about it on a narrative level because I saw John talking about this on his shows, and I thought he did a good job actually for a Heroldian dialectic. I think this is big. It doesn't shock us. I mean, it's nothing we haven't heard before, but the timing of it, the fact that it followed up the Monroe Doctrine statement, I think is signal, and I kind of want to tie some of those things together and see what my guest has to say about it. What else do I have going on? I am sick. I am slowly recovering. I don't know if my voice will last, but hopefully it does. First 2 hours tonight, Brad is going to be here. If I filibuster for another 40 minutes or so, doesn't count. He has to stay for 2 hours once he's on. We could even go like an hour into his show, and then I think the shows all just become one show that's happening all at the same time. So that's a possibility as well. Third hour, though, I'm going to hang out a bit with you guys if I still have a voice. I got some Sovereign Alliance stuff I want to talk about that may or may not come up during our conversation. And if you want to interact during the show, if you have anything you guys want to say about what I'm calling the Trump Doctrine this week, send over a Rumble rant, send over a boost, and I'll keep an eye on any that are relevant to the conversation during the conversation. And then for any others we don't get to, I will grab them in my little solo section where I hang out with you guys. Please hit the thumbs up button as you come in. Otherwise, I'm going to intro us with a couple of our sponsors tonight and then bring our guest on, starting with Mike Lindell.
I'm excited to announce that we're having our biggest Made in America sale ever. We just put huge discounts on products made right here in the USA. My Pillow bed pillows, body pillows, go anywhere pillows, bolster pillows, all made with my patented adjustable fill. Mattresses, mattress toppers, mattress pads, adjustable bed frames, mattress foundations, and so much more. All made right here in the USA. And now we're expanding our USA products beyond just quality sleep. Like the cross I wear every day, now available in both men's and women's. We even have USA-made socks. And are you tired of being tired? Try our new health beverage, Rev 7. Or how about my coffee, the greatest coffee ever. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use this promo code to get deep discounts on all these products. Plus, for a limited time, your order ships absolutely free.
Did you hit the thumbs up button? Answer in the chat. We'll fucking wait here all night if we have to. I hope you did. All right. And we're brought to you by our friends at Pet Club.
Science proves that a healthy immune system is the body's first defense against the smallest of ailments to the most catastrophic. Coriolus versicolor is the most sought-after, all-natural supplement for both humans and pets to help boost the immune system. There are over 400 studies worldwide on its effectiveness in humans, including Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, MD Anderson Cancer Center, and now from the University of Pennsylvania School of Veterinary Medicine. Together, we can help reverse this terrible tide now plaguing your loved ones and give them the immune-boosting supplements that they need.
Thanks, Pet Club. And I see most of my minions in chat have indeed hit the thumbs up button. I appreciate that. The field trip will continue. We're not turning the bus around. All right, without further ado, bringing on my buddy Brad, who I always bring on when I'm feeling good, or when I need to feel good. I think you're logical, but you're always positive, and I like that. And I'm feeling positive this week. But before we start grab-assing or talking about some real shit, I have a question for you that's unrelated, that I will judge you on the back of, but I'm gonna sort of not let it color the conversation. Okay.
You talking to me? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I mean you. I have a question for you.
Chat. I do have a message for chat for our overseas viewers too. I know you were saying how important it is to hit the like button, and obviously everyone has a decision in that, except if you're in the Eastern Hemisphere, which you have no decision thanks to the revival of the Monroe Doctrine. You have to hit it, or else you're out of here.
That's true.
Power
is power. You work for us now. So you especially have to. No, I was saying, before we get into the topic tonight,
yes,
I have an important question for you on an unrelated topic that I may judge you on the back of. What are your thoughts on the movie Skyfall? Just broadly.
I mean, I don't know what this means for being judged on it, but I've never even heard of the movie Skyfall. So
the Daniel Craig Bond movie, Skyfall? Are you not a Bond guy?
No, I saw Octopussy when I was a kid. I liked it, but I've never gone past that. No.
Wow. That's interesting. You should do your story hour homework then, because I think you'd actually like it. So, not Skyfall. Okay. The trick question was, man, that's shocking to me, given your movie lore. So Chris Paul was texting me earlier before the show because he is doing his homework for Tuesday night. The homework for Tuesday night is Casino Royale, the 2006 Bond film, the first one of Daniel Craig. And Skyfall is the third Daniel Craig Bond film, came out in 2012, directed by Sam Mendes. And Skyfall is considered by idiots to be the best of the Craig Bond films, but I would say it was the beginning of the subversion. 2006 Casino Royale is the best Bond film, and I know that's going to get reactions from the chat. Do your homework. There are reasons for that. And yeah, it should be a fun show on Tuesday night, but I thought you were more cultured than you actually are, Brad. So, you know, you're living up to your MOOC billing.
You know, I was thinking about this the other day. I've probably watched like 10 movies in the last 7 years. I don't know why. Like the Great Awakening has totally severed my music, my everything, and I'm trying to get back into it. I just watched Kill Bill 1 with Abby the other day because she hasn't seen it yet. And I was like, that's a crime against humanity. So we'll be watching part 2 soon. But yeah, man, I'm trying to get myself into the media sphere. And actually the audio files has helped that because I've been jamming some music again.
Right.
It's good. Yeah.
Yeah, but well, actually, on that note, part of why I say that about Casino Royale and Skyfall, Casino Royale was 2006. Skyfall was 2012, and I didn't recognize it at the time in 2012. You know, a lot of the subversion, you know how you and I have talked about The Last Jedi and a lot of the genre stuff we used to love and being systematically destroyed, a lot of it by Disney, but just the whole woke era that everybody in this audience has heard about for the last 10 years, right? Like the era in which I think wokeness started to really obviously affect movies was that 16 to 20 sort of range. But looking back, it's funny where you can see the years where it was starting to come in more subtle ways. And I'm finding it interesting sometimes on Story Hour when I pick like a, not last 10 years movie, but like 2000s, the early 2000s to the late 2000s. There was a subtle shift going on before the wokening. And I think the Bond movies are kind of interesting because they're like, you know, they only make one every few years, sometimes every 5+ years, and they tend to be very steeped in kind of the zeitgeist. So I think it's interesting when you look at a Daniel Craig Bond movie 6 years apart and how they were portraying the world in 2012 versus 2006. But yeah, the 2006 one, I think, is a masterpiece. Yeah. All right, man.
Leap in what they were injecting. But I have noticed this too, dude. It started late 90s, early 2000s, just slow cuts, slow psychological. One thing I've noticed a lot going back is whenever there's a character who's religious Christian figure, he's always either annoying or I was watching that movie not too long ago, maybe about 2 years ago, with Seth Rogen's An Alien or something like that, right?
Oh yeah. I think I forget what it's called.
Yeah, it was pretty good, I will say, and I like Seth Rogen movies, but
wasn't it called?
There was
Greg
the dad who's the Christian who was abusive and holding his daughter to be a slave to him, and I'm just like, here it is. This is like, there's so many movies like that, and then there's a lot of people who hate Christians.
Yeah,
and you're like, well, you've been kind of trained to think this way about them subconsciously over the years, or things like Sarah. Oh man, the comedian Sarah. She used to be on SNL. She used to be more right for SNL. And Jesus is magic and making fun of Jesus. All those things. It's like ha ha ha, or a cool thing, but they slowly cut away. Our belief systems.
My theory, that movie was called Paul, by the way. I said Greg,
and
then I looked it up, and it was, I knew it was just a generic name. It was called Paul. Yeah, the interesting thing I find on Casino Royale versus Skyfall, again, same franchise and same actor, which is why it's notable when there's a shift in tone. And I would say it's subtle, but you can see by the time 2012 rolled around, they were starting to attempt to emasculate the leading male figures. And Casino Royale is like the most hyper masculine Bond film that I would say they've made. Little trivia is that it's the only Bond film that's actually like close to the source material, the Ian Fleming novels. And then, you know, it feels like they were trying to, like you said about the Christian thing, they were trying to, before the full awakening of just like, I ain't need no man, they were doing it in more subtle ways in the mid 2000s and in the teens, where it would just be like the guy doubting himself constantly, not wanting to engage in violence and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, it was subtle at the time, and then the Trump era sort of accelerated them a little bit, I think.
Oh yeah, definitely acceleration. And then you find yourself watching one of your favorite shows, and the Hound is cowering behind a wall while Arya Stark is destroying people.
Yep.
You're like, hey, that doesn't make any sense. All right.
Yep. Absolutely. Oh man, don't get me started on Game of Thrones. So, the Trump Doctrine. This is kind of I think this is an interesting topic because this, like nothing anybody's talking about in our sphere or in the MAGA movement and in our audience this week, I would say is shocking or breaking new ground. You know, anything that was put out in the national security strategy, even the statement about the Monroe Doctrine that Trump put out. But I don't know. I think it's that we'll get into a few different things here and obviously take it wherever you want to take it, however it strikes you. But it feels different to me. It feels like, first of all, I can't believe 2025 is ending. Like, where the hell did that go? Maybe that's part of being a new dad. I don't know. But this year, I think we've taught the theme of many shows on Badlands this whole year has been some tension, not just within America, within the American mind, but within MAGA. You know, whether it's engineered or real, there's like Q people versus anti-Q people. There's different types of Q people versus each other. There's MAGA versus truthers. There's America First versus MAGA. Is Trump being successful? Is he not doing enough? Like all those conversations have been going on all year. And this week just felt to me like not even a narrative pivot by Trump, but like a narrative sort of crystallization in a way that I feel like we haven't seen since maybe in a year or more leading up to the 2024 election. But I wonder if any of it has hit you that way, of those two deployments, just broadly, if you felt like it was a shift or kind of more of the same.
Yeah, this goes into something that was brought up a lot in the Q drops, and it often gets conflated with unity. Oh, we're all America first. We all like what Trump's doing, so we all have to be best friends, which is not the case. You don't have to be best friends with every last person, but there are things on a broad scale where it's about division, and they were talking about how they did it for many years. They divided us by race, by color, by political ideology, man and woman, gender, and it was kind of, they took the American society as a whole, which, right, you don't have to be best friends to just be a complete society, but they started breaking it and then breaking it and breaking into different things. So now what's happened, as people have caught on since the first Trump administration that juxtaposed with the Biden administration, is a lot of people have said, hey, I may not agree with you on everything, but I like the general idea of what's happening, and our movement has grown exponentially, right? So now what they've done, which what I believe is happening is they have to start breaking that up. So they have to go, well, MAGA versus America first, this versus this, or, you know, they've obviously been splitting a lot of things, been happening on a macro scale overtly since the second term has started. And it's even been happening on personal scales. There's groups where all of a sudden now there's a fight and everyone has to pick a side and absolutely hate everyone else on the other side. We're going through that right now, unfortunately. But it seems to be the edict of how they're fighting us. And I don't want to say it's working, but I think too many people are falling for it.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And, you know, it's actually, I think, one of the more difficult tightropes to walk for us for us, I mean, I don't even know how to say it. For us at Badlands, sure, but also for people who fancy themselves truthers, like people who are trying, if you're in this movement, one of the ways I always define this is if you know what the movement is, then you're in it, right? If you know that there's an info war, then you're in it. Like that's kind of the, if you know about Fight Club, then you're in Fight Club. But the tightrope, I think, has been navigating that balance, or striking that balance between not wanting to be divisive and falling into what you lay out as potential enemy traps, because, of course, controlled opposition dynamic. Last week, I think, was it last week or 2 weeks ago, I was with Matt Arrett on the show. We were talking a lot about the controlled opposition dynamic, but we were also talking about, I think one of us, maybe it was me, had coined the term Trojan matryoshkas, as I would, but it's nice. Like Matt was talking about Trojan horses, right? Where you Trojan horse something into a movement, you get them to trust the message, Operation Trust. You've obviously rebuffed a lot of that. You talk about a lot of that in the Q movement. You know, we've all kind of talked about that, debunking the idea that it's Operation Trust, even though you should take it seriously and at least consider it at some point along the way. That's a Trojan horse, right? But I was saying there's a matryoshka element to it where there's, in 2025 in particular, it's not like just this right-left paradigm or duality. It's all these different dolls within dolls within dolls that you're talking about, where it's like, hey, it doesn't matter if you have already graduated beyond the right-left paradigm. They're going to get you into a different paradigm. It might be MAGA versus America First. It might be neocons versus traditional conservatives. It might be libertarians versus whatever. It might be Q versus truther. Again, even though those things shouldn't be opposed. And the reason I say it's a hard tightrope is because on the one hand, I'd say, hey, just get away from all the division. But on the other hand, we do talk about sometimes that sifting process and that friction process ultimately being good and necessary for people to see and engage in. And I kind of wonder how you strike that balance, right? Of recognizing opposition dynamics maybe being engineered that you're pointing out, but are there ways to either engage with them or observe them that are actually positive, that can bring us into more positive places?
Yeah, I mean, it brings conversations to the table, right? So, I mean, that's a positive. It gets the two sides. Yeah, they get us fighting. But then there are topics that are brought up that ultimately we can iron sharpen iron, maybe find some sort of middle ground and get the best version of said topic, where one side that wasn't happy about it, but the other side was. So, I mean, that's the only positive I can see from it. As far as it being an ultimate negative, why I don't think it'll work, because I don't think it doesn't have the same result as what it used to be. Like they used to get us to fight, right? Like I was saying, say man versus patriarchy versus matriarchy and stuff like that. And the people who would get involved with that would totally disconnect from everything else that was happening, right? And they would just be like, I'm fighting the patriarchy. And it's all they cared about. And the war machine and all these other things and the drugs flowing in, and they could care less. No one's paying attention. And that was the ultimate goal, right? Between sports is a distraction, the division is a distraction, and they all work. With these distractions, we're all still paying attention to what's going on. You know, we might be fighting each other, but we're still punching the same opposition of each other. We're like really punching each other. Well, we're both punching that way. So it's why it's still gonna work. I like what you were saying, like layers upon layers. Like we're like a Russian nesting doll. They're separating the layers on the inside, but we're still one entity, whether they like it or not. And we don't all like each other. We don't all agree. There were tons of people out there who consider themselves right-wing conservatives, who I hear them talking. I'm like, man, I don't agree with 30% of what you're saying right now, but that's okay. We're trying to be free thinkers, and we are all pushing towards a free America where people aren't purposely made poor, which I think is just the grand tenets of what everyone's purported to be fighting against forever, but we're actually doing it. So,
yeah, and I think I'll kind of connect what you just said with why, I guess my lead thoughts of why this week felt really, really positive and like I keep wanting to use the word pivot, but that's not what I mean. More of a crystallization out of Trump, because I've gotten this feeling all year that, it's not like Trump is paying attention to individual squabbles on True Social or X. He's probably not paying attention to like Badlands being attacked by people or defending themselves or whatever, or the perception of us attacking people. Probably not paying much attention even to, Candace Owens versus Ben Shapiro and all that stuff that's going on. But I would be surprised if Trump's team, the Patriots, whoever you think is behind the Q drops, which obviously is a psychological operation, right? Part of being a psychological operation and a mass psychological operation is that you've got to be monitoring the psychological battle space, right? You've got to be monitoring the different layers. I call them the layers of the collective mind. And it's clear that 2025 has been extremely contentious within that macro doll that you just kind of mentioned. Like within the MAGA core, it has been more contentious in 2025 than it has been in a long time. There's been a lot of intra-MAGA sifting and strife and conflict.
Yeah.
So I've had this feeling throughout the year that, as he has done before, I think, Trump has been aware of that and has sort of allowed it to fester and sort itself out up into a point. And, pick your topic. Like maybe instead of talking about individual figures and outlets, media outlets and everything, it's probably more productive to just rattle off some topics. Like Israel is a topic that has been contentious within MAGA.
Oh, yeah.
Tariffs have been actually contentious. I would say mostly unified, but a little contention there of saying, hold on, is this actually a free market? Because you're taxing people for engaging in the free market. That's not really a libertarian ideal. And again, I believe in it, but there's been all these different arguments. Trump, talking about income taxes and saying, hey, we're going to eliminate these. And it's like, well, when Pete Hegseth, as Chris Paul pointed out the other day, does a press conference and says, hey, we're asking the American people to fund X, Y, and Z conflict overseas, and they deserve more transparency. And Chris says, you're asking. So are you telling me that there's a choice of whether or not I can do this, right? So like there's been a lot of different topics. Epstein has been actually has become a contentious topic within MAGA because people are like, hey, don't talk about it anymore. It was never a thing. Trump never brought it up. I mean, John says that all the time. I don't really agree. We fight about that. And then other people are saying, well, hold on. I mean, they did lean into this controversy for quite a while, really heavy in some people's views, and now they're just deciding to move on. So it's just a few examples of some topics that I think they were very well aware were contentious, but that it seems like they let play out, and I wonder if they were okay with that to a certain point.
Well, I think they very much welcome the fog of war kind of distraction ops at times. You have the media focused on something like DEI or Epstein or kind of like a domestic emotional topic, then you can start writing up. You could start writing up national security strategies and start passing some things and putting ducks in a row, and all of a sudden, hey, we're blowing up drug traffickers. Whoa, okay.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, they didn't just decide that out of nowhere.
Right.
I think to an extent, not saying they like it when these things happen, but I think they use all the events of the day to their advantage. And the way you use those things to your advantage is, well, it's happening. Let them focus on that. We're just going to keep working on this, and that. And it takes the spotlight off of them, especially for people who are digging into what the Trump administration is about.
Yeah, that's well said. And again, to get in, let's start with the Monroe Doctrine, because the reason I thought this was positive is
I love this.
It was just so simple it called back to our past, but before we even get into the national security strategy, which I don't think it's coincidence, the timing here of these two things at once, but it felt to me like, as Trump said about Nick Fuentes, I pointed this out a couple weeks ago on the show. They were talking about, somebody asked about Nick Fuentes versus Tucker Carlson, etc. Part of this sifting I'm mentioning. Excuse me. And Trump said...
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Trump said, the people have to decide, let the people see it. With Fuentes and Carlson, which I think sums up everything we both just said, right? And then he follows that up. Like the peak, it felt like kind of the peak maybe of this intra-MAGA strife. With like 250th, Monroe Doctrine, Trump corollary, national security strategy. And to me, it felt like we don't all have to get on the same page about everything, but here's the pitch. Here's the pitch of what Trump is about right now. And I don't know, it felt like maybe for the first time since the coining or the resuscitation of MAGA itself, there's like a real crystallizing or direction behind what Trump is doing on the back of especially the recognition of the Monroe Doctrine.
Well, dude, I think a whole lot of this experience over the last 10 years too, on a bigger scale, is stop, get away from the nanny state. Stop freaking expecting someone to tell you what to do or what to think. Start making decisions for yourself. It's like we've been so lulled into this, turn on the news and find out my opinion on this new thing kind of world, that it's turned into a total cancer. He did that with the vaccine, right? And he was like, yeah, of course you should take it, obviously, because he didn't want them to hang him for mass murder charges. They tried to put him up for freaking filling out a line on a loan receipt wrong. What do you think they would have done if he openly was like, you shouldn't get that vaccine? He would be dead right now. But he said, but I think if people want to make the choice not to take it, they should be able to make that choice. Basically saying, don't worry about what they're telling you, what I'm telling you. Make your own decision. Or exactly, I didn't even know that he commented on Fuentes or anything, but that's exactly in the same line. He's been doing this with so many things, basically saying, don't ask me. What are you, a fucking baby? Watch the thing. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. I'm working on high-end stuff right now to decide the fate of the world. And you're asking me like whether or not you should watch this podcast. I think it's almost out of frustration sometimes, some of his answers, but the overarching message is for people to start being grown-ups again. If you look, this is something that fascinates me. We started off talking about the movies, and this is not a diatribe, just a quick little point. If you watch just a regular, dude, we will have none of that on the narrative. But if you watch just like a regular interview of kids in their freaking early 20s from the 70s, they're talking like sussed out adults in their 40s from nowadays. And you're like, damn, dude, like well-spoken. They know what's going on. They're not these zombied out retards that we see now. If you get a fucking thing of an 18-year-old talking and you're just like, whoa, this world is destroyed. And that's because they grew up normal. They didn't have all these psyops and distractions. They had some, but man, there was like 5 TV channels as opposed to 500 and the internet and your favorite music and your favorite movies and your everything, right? So we have to get there like adults. People were adults at a much younger age then. I was lucky to be raised by parents who were wildly disconnected from a lot of stuff and just raised us like normal people too. I felt like I was an adult at a young age, but you don't see that anymore, and we need to get back to it. And part of being an adult is making your own decisions.
Well said, man. This is what I was hoping, is that I just felt like you'd be good. This was good timing for you to come on the show and talk about this stuff, because I have
Go on.
I have these ideas that haven't really crystallized about, I think, why, like, sometimes these things hit you on like a psychological or emotional level that you're not really fully crystallizing yet. I've also been sick the last week, but the combination of the Monroe Doctrine and the national security strategy that Trump put out, it it hit me in a really positive way, and it made me, ironically, think of all the schism and strife that's been going on in 2025. Not that I think this is a magical fix to it, but sort of what you just elucidated there helps, I think, crystallize why I'm thinking that. And it made me think of the Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes clip. To your point, not only I think is Trump saying you need to be adults, but it's almost like, you and I grew up this way. Sometimes you got to let your little cousins like fight.
Yeah.
Because if you don't let the boys fight, even if you're the older cousins, like I grew up in like a wolf pack of my cousins where it was like, the oldest ones. And then I was like in the middle, and you had to, the strife within the pack would start to boil over and you just ruin every game, right? If you're like cousin 4 and 5 and you're having conflict with each other, it doesn't matter that cousins 1 and 2 can beat you up. If you're in conflict with each other, but you're never allowed to resolve it, you're going to ruin everything that the whole group does. So eventually they put you in the backyard, which literally happened with me and my cousin when I think I was like 11 and he was 12. And we just kept ruining every game by like hitting each other too hard or whatever it was. So finally, my older brother and his older brother, who were the top 2 cousins, put boxing gloves on us and just put us in the backyard. And it was at a family cookout, and they like made all the aunts go inside. And we fought for like an hour, a full hour, until we just stopped and then went inside. There was no like, we didn't talk about it afterwards. We didn't like, nobody cried. And of course we were kids, so we weren't able to hurt each other that bad. It's like, we had bloody noses. But I always remember that moment because I was like, oh yeah, they knew, the older brothers knew, just like they have to fight. These two have to fight and figure it out. And it really felt like Trump, like the MAGA movement was riding a high in November 2024. And maybe people think that this is the deep state came after us in 2025. Like, guys, the deep state's been fucking after us the whole time. Like, they haven't taken their foot off the gas at all, right? Nope. I don't think it was the deep state that came after us in 2025. I think Trump threw a bunch of boxing gloves into MAGA with some of these narratives and was like, you fucking fight about it. You fight about it. I'm going to concentrate on some other shit. And then like he comes in at the end of the year and it's like, hey, would you guys like this new super based but also old callback to a first principles framework that we might be able to all kind of get on board with while still maintaining your individuality and your little cores you've been forming in there. I think that's why I thought it was so genius, because he's like, all right, you've got it out of your system. Now let's create a new Monroe Doctrine.
Yeah, dude. And for everyone who doesn't really know, the Monroe Doctrine is basically telling everyone in Europe and overseas, like, hey, guess what? You have no say in the Americas now. We will be policing this and taking care of everything over here. You're not allowed to Europe. You're not allowed to colonize anyone anymore, right? They were all taking South American countries and Central American countries and saying like, we won't touch the ones you have. But it's it. We're pausing it right now. And it was kind of like, not in a USA in isolationist document, but kind of like a separating of the two. We'll stay out of you guys' business. You stay out of our business. And that has been trampled on over the years as most of these influences we call the deep state or the cabal are basically these entities that are eliciting overarching control over our population. A lot of them do stem from overseas. A lot of them. They all go back to Europe or Israel or even like China and stuff like that. So basically, the Monroe Doctrine has just been molested. Technically, we've gone against it, right? Because we also say, well, we won't stay out of your things. But meanwhile, you got World War I, World War II. And this is also what I've always looked at the Monroe Doctrine as kind of one of the reasonings behind false flags, right? Because like World War I, they sunk our supply ship. We got to go in. And it's not us getting into their business. Or World War II, Pearl Harbor, or hey, they blew up New York and I don't know, some other city or whatever, But we have to go over there. But like it's a staunch thing of kind of separation there that's supposed to go with it. But I like the idea of them bringing it up and putting it in people's minds. And then he even just did a thing on the anniversary on the 2nd about it. But right before this, the national security strategy of the United States comes on, because this is what is a lot of this document kind of talks around this stuff. It talks about kind of strengthening the Americas as trade partners, and very much. So it's very much steeped in like the tariff stuff. I can tell, because if you think about this, what do you get out of strengthening your partners in the Americas for things like trade or whatever? It's way less money to send something from India than it is to send something from, say, like the top end of South America, or from Canada, or even from Mexico. And so you start strengthening those trades, and that will eventually be something that brings down money and eases your economy. It also then, as they start to strengthen, is talking about a lot of strengthening of American businesses in this, as they get stronger too, and as some of these foreign countries, it gets a little harder for them to trade here. We start coming up with alternatives that are stronger, and again, it's easier to drive something in a truck from Montana to Utah than it is to fly it from China to Utah. So as these things start replacing each other, costs are going to go down and the economy is going to boom. So I think on an economic scale, there's a lot of good stuff in that, and it's very Monroe Doctrine-esque.
Damn straight. I saw somebody in the chat say that Trump stole BB's regions of responsibility. He literally names them. He doesn't say that. He says responsibility for their regions. But we'll get into a bit of that with the national security strategy. I totally agree with how you laid that out. And he put out this memorandum basically on December 2nd, celebrating the Monroe Doctrine. And when he does these things, this is why I started the narrative. This is why I talk about things from a narrative perspective. I think, especially this audience, but even more normies, MAGA normies, are starting to understand, a narrative deployment is a deployment. Like, there used to be a lot of pushback of like, well, this is just a narrative. This is just a messaging thing that he's doing, when he says literally presidential message on the anniversary of the Monroe Doctrine. Okay, Trump's put out a little press release. It's a rah-rah thing. Yeah, it's a story. It's a story for a reason. And everything you just laid out, I think, are the first principles that we'll talk about. But even on a other note, when you start to follow things from a narrative level, the way a lot of us do, when this hit on December 2nd, I was thinking and saying on the Power Hour, I think, I wonder what this is signaling. I wonder what Trump is about to do. And then, we get the national security strategy comes out. And again, that was November, but it was released on the back of this. And, it's like, look at him. He preps, like, yes, it was on the 250th anniversary. You think they didn't have this national security strategy way before November 2025? They knew what their strategy was. They've known the whole time what their strategy is. He's as much said everything that's in the national security strategy, if you've been paying attention like we have for the last 10 years, or if you've been paying attention to the Q drops, etc., they've laid a lot of these principles out, but kind of out of order. To have them codified and crystallized in the strategy, I think is brilliant. But this is what led it off. This led off the narrative deployment. It was a callback to the Monroe Doctrine. And I think there's kind of a beautiful mirror here to the term MAGA itself, right? So on a branding level, I didn't even know this until a couple of years ago, but the MAGA messaging was a Ronald Reagan campaign slogan. I think a lot of our audience is aware of that. Trump repurposed it and made it his own thing. So that's one callback. It was a callback to Reaganomics, a callback to Reaganism that a lot of, especially baby boomers, have a lot of fondness for, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I'm not saying that that's bad. I think Trump leaned into that. Was like, hey, remember the Reagan years? We're going to do similar stuff to that. We're going back to the 80s. And on top of that, just MAGA as a slogan, Make America Great. I always say the most important letter in that slogan is the last one. Again. Make America Great again. It's not... I think it's on two levels it works. Same with this callback to the Monroe Doctrine. It says, first of all, we can do this. You know, Barack Obama runs on hope and change. All these candidates run on, we're going to make everything better. We're going to do something you've never seen before. And it sounds good, but it's a really tough sell for Americans on both sides of the fence and all the disillusioned people in the middle who are like, I've heard every politician say this forever. I think the brilliance...
They don't do anything.
They don't do anything. And I guess what I mean is I think the brilliance of Trump was he understood from day one of the MAGA messaging, and now this Trump doctrine, you need to call back to the origins of the nation in order to really energize the buy-in for the nation's future. Because the principles that built this nation never needed to be changed. And the only way the nation collapsed in the first place was because those original principles have been trampled and subverted and corrupted. So I just think it's another thing he does where he calls back and is like, guys, I'm not creating some new thing. I'm going back to this other thing that you're talking about with the Monroe Doctrine.
Yeah, and he's engaged the public in all of this, where, like you said, they'll be running, and Obama was like hope and change. And then, well, he made some bad changes, obviously, but as far as like the public being involved in what he was doing, if he was on an interview on Ellen, he wasn't talking about any of his policies or anything. He was like talking about dancing and stupid stuff that kind of is like light to the moth of the people who didn't care. They voted for Obama because they didn't want to be racist, or they were just a Democrat, or they liked the way he sounded, and then just shut off. And that's what we're doing for a long time. Trump has used social media to involve us. Who ever read a memorandum from the Obama administration? Next to no one who voted for him, and certainly none of us. Right. I mean, well, here we are. It's just a random memo in December of 2025. Well, it's not so random because it's actually pretty consequential. I agree. I think it's pretty huge. And we're like reading it, breaking it down. Other shows are reading it and breaking it down, and things are being shared on social media. Trump has used Truth Social and social media and Twitter before that to reach the people and involve the people. Twitter was around for the entirety of the Obama administration. They didn't use it like this. They'd make general statements. Maybe they share something here or there, but Trump has everyone involved in everything. He was doing it through the Q drops early on as well. We say, like, we argue where they come from. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that was just Trump team communicating to us through the chants. And I think they did a great job of getting everyone on board with what they were doing, what they were about, what they wanted to do, and also just talking directly to us. And now people say, is Q going to come back? Just go to Trump's True Social page. Go to Scavino's page. Go to these places. They're just talking openly about the things that they didn't dare talk openly about in that first administration. So we're involved in it, and that is the whole point, giving it back to the people. This is what he said in his first inaugural address. And giving it back to the people means, hey, you actually have to get involved and start reading these things and make your voices be heard and make decisions.
That's well said. And it makes me think bicamerally, positively and negatively. It's funny during, for example, the Obama era that you bring up.
Yeah.
It's almost like if you were showing people executive orders, presidential directives, memorandums, or anything from like whitehouse.gov in the Obama years, you were probably using those to try to black pill people or red pill people, but at the time it felt like black pilling, right? Like one that I can remember as an example, that started to really, it was like the moment, the inflection point for me. I remember when I became an anti-Obama guy. Like I was starting to sour on him, but it was during Occupy Wall Street, and I was engaged in that narrative as a liberal. Again, controlled opposition dynamic. conservatives in the U.S. saw a bunch of, liberal burnouts protesting and, said, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Liberals saw a bunch of conservative Americans defending Goldman Sachs on Wall Street and we're like, guys, maybe there's a little bit that we could talk about here. That's where Steven Crowder made his name by debating people and being like, I think the profit system is great the way it works right now because capitalism. It's like, aren't you fucking Canadian? First of all, shut the fuck up. But second of all, there's a lot of controlled opposition dynamic going on at that time. But I remember Barack Obama, there was controversy because there was the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, which is a lot of presidents have used, have updated, etc. And there was a proposal in the NDAA during Occupy Wall Street in order to allow for the indefinite detention of Americans who were protesting in non-designated protest zones. So this started out of Occupy Wall Street. And Obama was confronted with a question about that at a press conference. And he said, if that comes to my desk, the amendment, the addendum, however they call it, I'm going to veto it. He signed it into law at 11:59 p.m. on whatever night it was meant to go into law. Now, as far as I'm aware, it wasn't used, and it probably would have been challenged, right? There's all these caveats to it. But I remember looking on the White House website as a liberal and being arguing till I was blue in the face, no pun intended, to other liberals and saying, guys, Barack Obama just gave New York cops the right to indefinitely detain peaceful protesters and detain them without trial if they were not protesting in a designated zone. So of course, they gave them a little slice of a park on the edge of Wall Street where they were allowed to protest. Yeah. And I guess the point I'm making is at that time, people dismissed, you would show them a directive from the White House. You would show them the President of the United States signed this document. This is the law of the land right now. This is how American law enforcement is behaving. And they'd be like, I don't know. I didn't see it on the news and I didn't hear Obama say that. Where to your point about Trump, it's maybe one of the low-key, most positive things that he's doing that could affect things going forward is he has, to your point, gotten people engaged and directive. Go look at what he's putting down on paper. Go look at what they're actually doing and actually maybe pay less attention to what he's saying in a press conference or what a newscast is saying about him or what he's saying in an interview, And again, it's we used to show people actual presidential actions and they'd dismiss them because the news didn't talk about it, where now a lot of people are just going straight to the source.
Yeah, that's pretty cool that you were up on that too. I started getting disillusioned during the Obama eras, and I was checking out a lot more than I was during the Bush era. But to that same point, during the Bush era, there were just things that would bother me that I kind of just made excuses for. I was like, well, whatever, we're going to agree on everything, instead of being like, hey, something's probably wrong here. One of the things I remember was when they did away with it was attacking stem cell research. I remember thinking wow, you probably want to keep doing that. Now I look at it a little different because now that I know, the abortion angle makes me look at it a little different. But at the time, I remember being like, well, why wouldn't you just keep doing this research? I thought that was weird. But I was random side. I was working on the Foundation for World Trade Center 2 during the Occupy Wall Street during that. And there were some people on the job who were for it, some who were against it. And a lot of us were just like, you dirty hippies, shut up.
Yeah.
But yeah. And I remember there was one kid who was a truther. And now in hindsight, I know this. At the time, I didn't even, conspiracy theories. I didn't really get into too much of that. And he was for it. And it was my friend. And he would talk about certain things with corruption in Wall Street. And he made some good points. I remember him telling me too about fluoride in the water and all this kind of stuff we talk about now. And he's like, you got to get a Berkey water filter. Got to get a Berkey water filter. That's the way to go. And I was like, okay, man. And I did. and it was like this big dookie thing on my counter for the longest time that I barely ever used. But now, man, I'm really into that sort of stuff. I've been looking into just things with the water and the ideas of what fluoride really does to people, and there is merit to those arguments in dumbing down society.
Was it 2023? I put a whole filter system on my house. So
I think I remember that.
But it was prompted really. We had talked about it, Mrs. Bright.
Is it a reverse osmosis one?
Yeah, actually, because we've got two things. We got a water softener tank that pulls the metals out of the water.
Oh, that's good.
The plumber was like, he was like, "Can I ask you, why are you doing this? Why are you getting a water softener?" And I was like, "Well, the water is hard, obviously. That's why you get a water softener. But metals aren't a huge concern of mine. I was concerned about fluoride." He was like, "Are you concerned about chemicals or metals?" And I said, "Chemicals." He said, "Well, a water softener does nothing with chemicals, and everybody thinks it does." So we've got a carbon filter that is also on there. So basically, if you go in my basement, there's like two big scuba tanks, and one of them is a water softener that strips the metals out, so the iron and the calcium and magnesium and all that kind of stuff through reverse osmosis. Then it goes through a carbon filter, and the carbon filter is just like this giant tank of carbon, and the carbon filter pulls out fluoride, anything like that, and basically dealkanizes it. And then that goes into the tank for the house. But yeah, it's
that's
one
awesome.
of those things. You can taste the difference. Like you can, and I use potassium salt which we notice the difference. If you use a regular sodium chloride, you kind of get like literally a salty flavor in your water. But we use potassium chloride. So not only does it do the reverse osmosis, but it actually injects potassium into your water. So then your drinking water has potassium in it. The whole thing costs us like less than $4,000. Like, I'm not saying that's cheap, but I thought it was going to be way crazier.
Yeah.
So, and yeah, literally like all the faucets in our house, including the showering and everything, like we just fill up our water glasses from the sinks and drink that way. And you can tell. Yeah. So I would highly recommend people look into it. But yeah, that's the secret, is that you can't just get a water softener. You got to get a carbon tank is what's going to depoison the water. The beads, what do they call them? The beads that are in the softener are going to strip the metals out.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, because people think like, well, I don't even drink my tap water. Well, you cook your spaghetti in it.
Yeah.
Cook any number of things. Then you make your freaking tea with it. You douse yourself in it every single night when you're showering.
That's one of the biggest things.
At least once a week, you dirtbags. But but like that, like, and everyone's like, well, how does that affect you? Well, just ask anyone from the 70s if they ever had someone put an acid stamp on their hand or something. Like, the skin is the biggest organ and it takes in everything.
I was just gonna say that. Yeah, that then you start to think in hindsight, like, man, how many chemicals have I been subjected to? I've even been going to swim with my son on Sundays, so I went this morning with him, and like, it is what it is. We're going in a public pool, but now that my house is like de-chemicaled, I'm looking at the pool just being like, man, I don't know if this is great for us to be swimming around in.
Take a chemical bath, bro. Take a
then we rinse off in the high school showers. So I'm sure that's much better. We get the hard water out of the showers and clean all the chlorine off of ourselves from the pool. Then get home and take a bath in our clean water. So eventually he gets to the clean water.
Nice. You're greatly minimizing your exposure to it. It's freaking awesome.
Yeah. As much as we can. But again, these are those things. Mrs. Bright sends me these things all the time. Now being a mom, she's much more health focused on stuff we weren't thinking about before. And man, isn't it interesting to see the rollbacks? You mentioned fluoride, and all of a sudden it's becoming okay to talk about that. We had today and yesterday, the last few days, we had the CDC officially take away their recommendation for the hepatitis vaccine for newborns, which, as somebody who was just in the hospital 1 year ago, with a baby who didn't vaccinate at all, but that was on the schedule when I was there. So these are big changes that now, and Donald Trump, it's kind of funny, speaking of the past, you've been a guy that's pulled up a lot of Trump's old tweets, and a lot of the original ones he was talking about, it was like the drinking water and autism and vaccines.
Exactly. And then he's like plays coy in front of the cameras when he's president while bringing people on who are passing exactly that sort of stuff.
Yep.
So, and people pretend like they don't understand, but so many things are just, there's so many things have changed you can talk about now. Even just like we're talking about like the deep state, right? It's almost become a meme just to say it because it's such a collective term at this point. But nobody would even know that phrase didn't even really exist largely before any of this, or the whole idea that there's this overarching control system set up to keep you poor and in kind of like your own sort of prison. That concept was laughable. That's stuff they made fun of in movies, like okay, Illuminati guy, and now it's like almost accepted. And like even things like there's so many things that are just so accepted. Tom Homan came out today, and he was saying, "No, the Trump administration has rescued 62,000 migrant kids from sex trafficking, child labor, and child labor, and just the whole idea of child trafficking." Was like, yeah, that's going on, but I don't know, those crazy conspiracy theorists. Well, now we're getting like statistics and people are actually doing stuff about it. And it's a lot of it. There's not a lot of outward, I'm sorry, vindication. They're just kind of covering it as if they didn't call us all crazy for so long, but whatever. These are things that are now just a part of the public conversation. And that is a great service to humanity. That's why a lot of things too, where I think of, when people talk about the speed of stuff that is happening, I think we are very much a victim of instant society. We know something we want to happen, and we're like, why didn't it happen yesterday? And we get mad, and sometimes we could almost submarine things by getting too, and not impatient about them. But the idea that all these things are normal place now, the narratives of them are acceptable, you'll never stop that momentum. That's changed the world forever, and it could only do good in the future, regardless of what happens with this attempt to change the world.
Yeah, well said. I think this is one of the reasons I always use the term in writing, not just symbols, but I use ciphers a lot, and I call a lot of these characters, Trump included, ciphers, cognitive ciphers. To your point about the trafficking angle, whatever the truth is about Jeffrey Epstein, and I think that narrative has been weaponized. I think it's been weaponized for good and for bad. I'm not saying that that's one-sided. Obviously, do I think that Dems in Congress are trying to help us get to the bottom of Epstein when they post creepy pictures of his dental chair and the masks and all that? I don't necessarily think it's bad that people on Twitter are talking about that, but you've always got to consider what is the narrative intent of the people disseminating the narrative. And if you think the Dems in Congress have all of a sudden woken up to the truth of trafficking, I got a bridge to sell you. Now, I still think it's a good thing. I think there's a reason they weren't talking about Epstein 5 years ago, and they are talking about him now. I call that Overton's goalpost. They've been forced to retreat, and now they're saying, well, I mean, we did know about Epstein, but that was a whole Trump thing, right? So they're trying to rebrand it and pivot it. That's not good. That's not the move of a winning player, I always say, in that kind of analog. And a stupid analogy I'll make on a positive note is I think part of what you're getting at, the speed of things and how, if we look at December 2025, how normal a lot of these conversations and topics are now, you're right. I mean, the term deep state is just ubiquitous now. You go to Zero Hedge, you go to, maybe not in the mainstream media, mainstream media, but like even Fox uses the term, Zero Hedge uses the term. It's all over X and Twitter. Even like normie layers of the internet talk about it. You go to a comedy show, they're talking about the deep state. You put a movie on right now, they're probably talking about the deep state, even if they're trying to subvert it. And I totally agree with you that is that's a win. And it makes me think of, like those airport, the moving walkways, like in an airport. Yeah. So again, stupid analogy, but I'm going to make it anyway. If you're on one of those, you only know that you're going faster than the rate of everyone else because the tarmac or the terminal is between you, right? So you're on the moving track. And if you're walking, you're going at double the speed. And people next to you that are on the marble are not on your moving track. So you can see your speed relative to their speed. So you're like, I'm going faster. The way I think we can get tricked, to your point about sort of the recency bias and the impatience, it's almost like the Great Awakening is meant to be the whole American mindscape or even global mindscape. If you're on a moving walkway that is infinitely wide to the point where you can't see the edges of it, that's almost what I think the awakening is. Like, you can be standing still on that walkway as a normie.
Yeah.
And the walkway is moving you into a new paradigm. You're just not aware that you're moving because the whole mindscape is moving at the same rate. And to your point, the way that we feel like they're going slow is because we're walking or running on that moving walkway while all these other people are standing still. So it's kind of like, I think both things are true. I think that the truth community and segments within it, including Badlands, are like sprinting headfirst toward what we believe is the awakening. And all these other people are staying still. Some of them are even trying to walk backwards a little bit. And yet the reason things are just getting better is that the whole walkway is moving. And again, it's so expansive that you can't see the edges of it. They've taken away these points of reference that would keep people retarded. And I mean that in a literal way. I don't know. That's how I think of it, but it's how I square the difference of saying, like, sometimes I do think it's okay for us to want to go faster, but I also think it's okay that there's people that are just kind of sitting there because they're going to get dragged in kind of behind us by sheer momentum.
Yeah, so you can't see the marble anymore. That's why a lot of times I like bringing it back to 2015. I just like to freeze frame that. That's what Trump said he was going to start running, and when he started talking about rhetoric, that we were like, I thought we couldn't talk about that. Every time I mention that on Facebook, I get yelled at by people who I thought were my friends. And he kind of like broke that spell a little bit, but that was also like, hey, that was right kind of in the middle of Obama's lame duck term, and that's usually when they do the most damage. And the world seemed like a dark place if you were a normal, straight, white Christian male in 2015, where it was like, oh, you guys hate everything about me? Okay. It was like weird. And nothing was changing. It was the marble was a moving walkway going in the other direction. It was actually going backwards.
Right.
And yeah, you're right. Things are going now. We're all on this expansive thing. You can't see anything against it, and we're sprinting. But I like that idea that those people are still moving forward. And to me, there's a lot that has been happening that I think is cool, but we're so used to just so much happening that maybe we just want everything all at once. And I think too is that we had 4 years with Biden. We were just like, oh man, dude, I hope someone comes in and starts changing this. And it was really awful to where we just wanted them to get in and do 5,000 things in the first month. Just kind of impossible. But they've been building a lot. They've been building a lot of foundational ideas that will work out. Again, that's a lot of stuff is in this national security strategy of America, where he's building up things like we were saying. If you strengthen the things in this continent, that's going to help trade and bring down prices. If you talk about using tariffs tariffs are one that's going to take a little time to suss out, because again, part of that is also you have to build up American industry, or else you have no pushback, you have no alternative, and now people in China or whatever overseas are literally just raising the price to cover their tariffs. Now it is costing more in the short term, and you're not seeing the true vision of what it will do in the long term, and they could use that against you. So that one's that's going to be a little harder, because in the interim, the economists know what will happen in the long term. They're trying to use this really quick to scare people, and you're doing that. They're setting up agreements. There are things in here that are talking about people in our government being tasked to help businesses, American businesses, in which I think it's great. And it's talking about kind of tasking them to go after that, look for opportunities for American businesses. The U.S. government will identify strategic acquisition and investment opportunities for American companies in the region and present these opportunities for assessment by every U.S. government financing program, including but not limited to those in the Departments of State, Department of War, Department of Energy, Small Business Administration, the International Development Finance Corporation, and the Export-Import Bank, Millennium Challenge Corporation. So he's given these organizations tasks, and it's all to build up American companies, to help the American people. These are foundational programs that you're not going to see until towards the end of his reign, but he's doing them anyways, putting them in order. And there are things too where, a lot of this is well thought out. One thing he was talking about with the tariffs, he was talking about strengthening economy and industries, and then he's used tariffs and reciprocal trade agreements as tools. I know here, actually, if you could share my screen, we won't like totally break this down or anything, but just to show that this is more than like, hey, I'm just gonna tariff them so much. This is the reciprocal tariff calculation that Trump has been using, that his administration has been using. And it kind of goes like this. The change in tariff rate on a country in question is determined by taking the total exports from that company and minusing the total imports from the company, and then dividing that by the elasticity of imports with respect to import prices, times the pass-through from tariffs to import prices, times total imports from country. So they're very specific formulas that they're using, and he has some of the best economic minds in the world on this. Trump himself is brilliant with this. I mean, he graduated.
Scott Besson won't shut up about how much of this is actually Trump's plan, because everybody in the financial world keeps wanting to say it's all Besson and Stephen Myron and everything, which I love those guys, and I think that they've got a lot to do with it. But Scott Besson can't stop praising and saying, Donald Trump is much more involved with the core of the strategy around tariffs than anybody in the financial media believes he is. Because, to your point there, that calculation, I think basically it's they've put a number, they've put an equation on a relative weighting scale of how imbalanced trade is with respective nations on a dollar for dollar basis. So it's not him trying to get more out of other countries. It's him saying, like, if you were actually paying market rates for American products, this is what it would be. And we're going to tag that onto your products.
Yes, and this is a temporary way too to get back to a true cost for these things. And dude, I have videos again, and I love that Sanders has been saying that, because Trump is very much, this is his wheelhouse. This is what he really has been talking about for years. I have interviews of him from the 80s talking about, why are we financing this country's military? We get nothing in return for that. Or why are we doing this? Talking about economic deals that our country is making that totally rob our tax dollars for nothing in return. I have things of him from 2000 like 11 or 12, whenever he was toying around with a run in 2011, where he's literally talking about tariffing China 25%, and they go, that drop it right on their head. And because he was talking about how lopsided these deals were. And he's also a realist, though, because then he also will say things like, I don't blame them. They want the best for their country, because I just want the best for my country. So he's a real dude who's had a lot of these plans rattling around in his dome for a long time, and he's getting to do them now. And I think the final result is going to be awesome. He also, too, in like his first term, he cut a ton of regulations to free up American businesses, really help small businesses a lot. And there are also things in here that are talking about freeing up companies. Let's see. There was something. I don't have it right here, but yeah, they were talking. He was talking about trying. The United States must also resist and reverse measures such as targeted taxation, unfair regulation, and expropriation that disadvantage U.S. businesses. And this is how they did it a lot. And a lot of this happened in the 90s or around NATO, and a lot of these things where they were all of a sudden manufacturing was run to Mexico and China, is that they start saying the big businesses, and then they tax them because they're going to get them and they're going to get their due. And that business says, all right, fuck you, I'll just go to this country. And they get up and move. And then you have that whole community. If that business, if that fat manufacturing plant had 5,000 people working at it, that's the whole core of that town who just lost livable wages. So that hurts there. Then then it costs more to get it because now it's imported instead of coming from down the block. So it just ruins everything. And they were doing it to get these businesses, but they weren't. They were trying to give them a reason to leave because they all wanted to go work away from our child labor laws and away from all these different OSHA manufacturing laws that become just impossible to make any money. And they use those as weapons. So here it is. That's right on page 19 of this bill, talking about reversing some of these unfair targeted taxation and regulations where they've destroyed any chance of making real money manufacturing here as compared to overseas.
Yeah, it's a good point, because it's almost it's a total inversion. And I've been talking about, somewhat controversially, the idea that I think Trump and Xi Jinping, obviously we've got the Q drops that mention that that allude to an alliance between them. Obviously, most of my writing at the beginning of my run in this stuff was about Russia. Only a couple of years in did I really start digging into the relationship between China and the U.S. To your point, the 90s was very big for that. The 70s was too, but the 90s was really big for it. The Clintons were huge. Bush Sr. was massive when it came to China. And Xi Jinping, in my view, and if you guys want any deep dive on that, go to my Substack and type in Doomed Dynasty. But China, if Xi is telling the truth about wanting China to become a global power with a Chinese middle class, i.e. like America, the only way to do that is for them to decouple from these American globalist institutions that you're talking about that got chased out of America and into China and India and Vietnam with the cheap cost of capital, the cheap labor, everything that you mentioned. And so I totally agree with you that basically the American deep state chased these businesses out of the country. Now, granted, the oligarchs who run these businesses were part of that plan, like, the Gates of the world, the Rockefellers of the world, going way back, but they all wanted to be chased. Oh, please don't tax me, Big Daddy government. I'll have to go to Vietnam. So
and look at what people like Gates are doing now, right? He divested from Arabella and all these things.
Yep.
They're pulling back.
They're pulling back. And that's exactly what I was going to say, is that China is hitting them on the back of Trump's tariffs. So that's why I've been calling it a multipolar pincer between Trump and Xi, where Trump, like, they're both boiling the frog. And the way you can think of this is Trump is basically turning the heat up over in China for the American companies that are over there. And Xi is mad that he's doing that, so he's turning the heat up even more on those companies. So when Trump was putting tariffs on China, Xi responded with sanctions on Apple, Microsoft, and the American companies. Those are the same companies that Trump is trying to drive back into the US. So, like,
I love that.
Xi is helping him do it. And the public face saving of it is that both of them get to say, like, hey, we're standing up for national ideals. Trump is saying we're bringing American companies back on shore. And Xi, to his people, is saying, fine, fuck them. We built all their shit. Now this is the thanks we get. Fuck them. Get out of here. And it's like, he's getting this national sentiment from the Chinese people of saying, well, why don't we have our own Apple? Why don't we have our own Microsoft? Why don't we have our own this, our own that, instead of making all the American shit for them? And it's like, that's exactly what we want. The Americans don't want the Chinese making their bullshit. The Chinese don't want to be making the Americans bullshit. And the only people who lose in this scenario are globalists, which is why this whole national security strategy, I totally love how you're laying it out. Man, security and military feels like a distant afterthought in this national security strategy, and I mean that in a good way. This is not a national security strategy that has at the front of its mind war. It has at the front of its mind a de facto posture of global peace, and the warlike posture that I think you're pulling out of the national security strategy is almost entirely economic, which I think is very encouraging, because it means another thing here besides the devolution angle and the Q angle of military in control of peace and peacekeeping responsibilities is the idea that if we get regions of responsibility and multipolarity, you are disincentivizing war in the first place, which seems to be the push behind what Trump is doing. And I just don't think he's alone on the global game board.
Yeah, dude, it's great. And it is, a lot of these things are mutually beneficial anyway. So it's not even like you have to almost craft them to be that way. But I love the way you're breaking that down with the way China's almost, they're fighting back, but they're almost kind of fighting towards the same goal.
They're both, and, look at who's running. Look at who's running from China. Apple, Microsoft, right? Like,
that's such a great
nobody's crying over
observation. That. Yeah. And again, actually, if you want to share my screen, there's another part in this memo that goes right along with that. I'll try to make it a little bigger for everyone. And this is on page 9, talking about the primacy of nations. The world's fundamental political unit is and will remain the nation state. It is natural and just that all nations put their interests first and guard their sovereignty. The world works best when nations prioritize their interests. And then he's obviously saying, well, we've known him to push for a long time that the United States will prioritize our own interests first, and in our relations with other nations, encourage them to prioritize their own interests as well. And this is mutually beneficial. I know a lot of people, they want to talk about, the globalism and we should all be working together. We can all work together, but we should retain our individualism. And what works for one country is different for other countries. So it's best if it's an in-house country prioritizing their own individual sovereignty. And this is funny because this is like a world country version of kind of what the idea of the states was supposed to be right here in America. So again, this is just a kind of us saying, hey, we found a system that works. We think the whole world should stick to it.
Man, I totally agree with that. And it's why I think I don't think you need to be like a sovereign alliance guy or think about that stuff literally to see the mutual benefit in the worldview. Ghost and I read a lot of Chinese and Russian state media, not because we take it all at face value.
No way.
Even though I do take a lot of it at face value, but a lot of it checks out. But because what's interesting is to see how they frame the things Donald Trump is talking about. One of the words that Trump has just started using this year, that his administration rather has started using, there might even be instances of it in this strategy. Let me just look it up. I think they did. No, they did not. The word that Russia and China are using a lot in the last decade, the last 5 years, is multipolarity. Trump uses the word sovereignty. So I called it the Sovereign Alliance. Russia, the last week, named it the Multipolar Alliance. Nice. Kirill Dmitriev said the Multipolar Alliance, which I was like, you son of a bitch, Kirill.
We see you guys.
Like, yeah, fuck you, man. I called it the Sovereign Alliance, and then I wrote the Multipolar...
Super chat first, all right?
Yeah. I wrote the Sovereign Alliance, and then I wrote an article in that series called the Multipolar Pincer. And then like a month after the Multipolar Pincer, he's like, yeah, there's like an emergent multipolar alliance going on. And really what they're saying is what you're saying. The alliance is one of competition. That's how I'm thinking of this. Like, I don't see the trade war and the tariff war as a means of bringing us all onto the same system. Gasara, Nasara, all that nonsense. I see it as resetting a rigged game. Like the code base of the game we have all been playing has been rigged by the people programming the game. Because what they did was they changed the rules, but the players didn't know that the rules had been changed. So the players are all playing on uneven playing fields. You know, you shoot something in one round and it does this much damage. You shoot it in the next round, it does double the damage and then half the damage. The rules are changing constantly by this disembodied apparatus known as globalism. And I think what these guys are doing, Trump, Xi, Mohammed bin Salman, Donald Trump, etc., they are all concentrating fire on the game masters. And then the plan isn't to all hold hands in a prayer circle. The plan is to compete with Russia and to compete with China and for them to compete with us, and nations get lifted up automatically de facto in that kind of an environment. Even lesser nations that maybe they don't have uranium, maybe they don't have the type of natural resources, but they probably have one thing that they do that makes them very valuable to a country that does have a standing military and does have all those resources. And that's what we're going to start seeing play out. You know, like I was reading today that China has very low uranium reserves, even though they're trying to make this push into nuclear, but Russia has a fuck ton of it. So that keeps Russia and China from fighting each other. And it's like, this is a good thing. It's good that Russia has something that China needs, and it's good that China has capacity that Russia needs in other directions. And again, I like your point about the states too, because it feels like that's kind of the game theory we're going to see play out in the US, hopefully over the next decade, over the next 20 years. Stripping away the federal government's power is like a national version of that concentrating fire rather than on the globalists. Maybe they're concentrating fire, metaphorically speaking, on the federal government. And the smaller the federal government gets, the more the states actually have to compete for each of us of whether or not we do business in those states.
Yeah, dude. Absolutely. And competition breeds innovation. So it's good for the world in general. It's just good for the future of mankind to have healthy competitions. And it's actually one of the pushbacks on the ideas of like communism a lot of times, is that you kind of take the fight out of your people and it kind of just gets stagnant in theory anyway. But yeah, so a good healthy competition. And I do think too with a lot of this stuff with China, because a lot of this stuff you could tell clearly in this, they're pushing back on the fact that everything you buy comes from China right now. They're trying to get others involved in the game and buff up American business to also get in the game. And you'll see a total departure then from prices right now that are being a little inflated temporarily with the tariffs. But eventually it'll create innovation and it'll force places like China, right? This is the problem with China. Like everything's coming from China, but it's all like cheaper made than when you used to get things from America. You know, my aunts and uncles used to have toys that they'd play with as kids in the 50s that are like still that they like have saved now. They're like, yeah, this is my Galoo doll. And it's still normal. When meanwhile, anything we own now in 50 years is just going to be broken or worn down. It's just like, it's not the same product. So they'll be forced. You want to compete with America? Well, one, you're going to have to compete with your prices, and you're going to have to compete with, why do I keep saying the wrong word, complete? You're going to have to compete with the quality of the product. I think I would love to see planned obsolescence just be destroyed also too. Like, well, first of all, you don't need to do it for tech things, right? Because technology is always advancing.
Right, you're going to want to upgrade anyway.
Yeah, you don't need to make the phone where it starts breaking down or not working as well in 3 years. It's going to be a much more advanced phone anyway. Someone's going to want to get anyway. But also too, like, bring back where you could buy a refrigerator and have it for 20 years. I know it's like, that's not good for business, you want continuing business, but maybe if we can change the way this economy works and change the way where make it less expensive to live, and you could change business models, we can go back to some of that stuff and it would just be better for humanity.
Well, and this is why if you speak him 3 times, he'll appear. So we have to only say his name up to twice on the show. But the G-money argument is fix the money, fix the world. The maximalists say that, and they're not saying it to be cute. They're talking about what you're talking about, right? Like the reason that the economy needs you to consume. Isn't it disgusting, by the way, that they call us consumers and we've all just accepted that? Like, tell me that isn't a humiliation ritual. Consume fridge, consume food, consume entertainment. Our consumers are very happy. What about your fucking customers? Have you forgotten that word? Remember that word? Customers? Consumers. Like, I'm going to start gnawing on the fridge in Sears. So it's gross.
That's some they live glasses shit right there. Yeah.
They say it right out in the open. They call us consumers. So, but the reason for that is the fiat system. The fiat system is an inflationary system. It's de facto inflationary, which as not Keynesian, the opposite, as Austrian economics would lay out, and not von der Leyen, Jesus Christ, I can't think of the name. Austrian economics would lay out that a true free market is inherently and naturally deflationary. And if you really start to think about that, it has to be, because of what you're laying out. If you actually had a true free market, the cost of goods and services inflates toward zero over time because of the competition with each other, and improves as it goes down. And because, again, that's a free market, that's a natural state of a free economy. The only reason we don't have that is because we have fiat money that is printed into existence. If you had a stable, fixed money supply, you encourage saving. People don't feel the need to spend constantly because their money's losing purchasing power. But the other thing is, all goods are then priced along the same framework, which is scarce. Not to go into a whole money thing, but I totally agree with you that that's another angle here of what Trump is trying to get us toward. And one of the ironies that you mentioned about China making all the cheap shit, which is basically true, the planned obsolescence model, the most infamous early example of this was the Ford Motor Company. And one of the funny things is, this is what shows that global competition, if it's honest, is also good. Von Mises, thanks Spotzel. Von Mises is what I was talking about with the Austrian economist. Global competition is good for Americans too, to your point. Because you know why Ford had to start stepping their game up and make like a better F-150? Because Ford was fucking the American people because they had a monopoly on vehicle manufacturing. And a little guy named Toyota, with a D, came over here, I think in the 70s, maybe it was even earlier. Somebody in chat will know. Toyota came over here, way before that actually, I think it was like the 30s, came over here and watched the Model T, and the big American innovation was the assembly line, right? And we were like the best at manufacturing, so invented the vehicle, mass-produced vehicle. Ford Motor Company I think it was the tie rod, engineered a specific aspect of the Model T to break within a certain amount of time because they wanted to keep producing Model Ts. So when Toyota came over and marveled at the American assembly line and wanted to reproduce it in Japan, he had a crazy idea. So his idea was, what if we produced cars at cost, but we made them last as long as they possibly could? And investors in Japan were like, well, why would you do that? How are you going to sell more cars? And Toyota said, we're a tiny, economy right now. If we become known for producing the best thing, our product will start beating all of the Americans, and we're going to sell it for half the price. And they called him a madman. And what's the biggest car company in the world? It's Toyota, by an order of fucking magnitude. And yes, a lot of modern companies have problems, but the entire philosophy behind Toyota was continuous improvement, i.e. free market dynamics. And that's how they started wrecking American companies, because the American companies weren't American. They were really globalist. That's
a mouthful, but that's a great example there, dude. Just make the best
Japanese
thing.
Cars. I'm just saying.
Well, dude, I mean, the way the internet is connected now, and the way people talk, this is prime market to be the best. Make the best product, and people will be doing reviews on it on their fucking Instagram and TikTok and shit. You get that, you can get that out there, and guess what? They will only be burning bright air conditioners. Will be the only thing that people want to buy ever again. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, I fixed the money. You fix the system. Totally, dude. When people ask like, how do you red pill friends? One of the things I used to always say was just talk about the banks. That is universal. It's not liberal. It's not conservative. That is something that affects all of us. And it is something that's very easy. You started talking about the Fed and how it's not even remotely what its name suggests and how it screws us. And all of a sudden you could start cracking that dam with them. And one of the things we talked about before the show, talking about maybe like how some of this, how the Q drops factor into some of this, right? The vision that they laid out, basically, like I said earlier, I just look at it as the Trump team. They used the chance and to rip the veil off because they needed us on board. They needed us to kind of know some of these things before they can move forward, which would undoubtedly have been seen as radical. If we didn't know some of what the veil is, we'd be like, why are you going against the Fed? What? Most of us didn't have an idea. But that was one of the first things they went through, right? So first, like the drops, basically, they were able to successfully communicate to us the real circumstances of our country on a foreign domestic scale. And one of the first things, they broke down the economic tyranny through the banking systems, such as fractional reserve banking and the Mayer Amschel Rothschild central bank planning subjugation system, which is again they lay out a list of like 100 companies that have central banks owned by the Rothschilds, right?
Yep. And, man. Well said. And you mentioned deep state earlier, and I think one of the notes I'd written down was that ironically the Q drops I think motivated a lot of us early on to dig into individual players, players within the deep state. And I think that makes sense. That's a lot of the times how you get people engaged in a story. I always say this in my writing. What's at the heart of a good story? A good character, right? Donald Trump understands this. I think the Q drops understood this, of saying, hey, what about the Clintons? What about these? What about the McCains? What about these families? And it gets you engaged because you're like, yeah, these motherfuckers. You can put faces to names, right? But you're absolutely right.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. But you're absolutely right, though, that isn't all the drops talked about. In fact, oftentimes it was just the thing we were focusing on. They laid out the macro system dynamics at play. And I think that the positive here, to loop back into the national security strategy, and why I think it does call back the Q drops, or the Q drops projected it, is that this was laid out in the drops, this mission statement. And very publicly, it was laid out in Donald Trump's public rhetoric of Make America Great Again, right? He was talking about globalists going way back and talking about all this kind of stuff, granted in more vanilla, normie-friendly terms, where the drops were really kind of digging into like, no, look at who owns the banks. Look at what the banks have done. And yeah, I think maybe as a community, we have leveled up to the point now. It's maybe another really positive way of looking at how this national security strategy is written and how detailed it is, talking directly to the American people on these macro, vast systems topics. That's a sign of how far we've come in their estimation. They're like, why don't we just start talking about systems dynamics to you guys?
Yes.
Right? I mean,
yeah,
the drops were doing that 10 years ago, but they weren't doing that writ large to just the American people. Like, hey, this is how the globalist system works. This is how the banking system contributes to it. This is how our currency system contributes to it. And this is how we're going to combat it.
Yeah, like I think they needed a bunch of us to know about that first, and then they could slowly present it to the rest of the public to where now they're saying it and we can back it up. And we've already have a ton of research on it, so we can actually get into the nuance of some of the things they're presenting. I like how you're saying, they were using those as a vehicle, like placeholders, like Soros's, Rothschilds.
Yep.
And
translation layers.
Yeah, I love that. And but they had us focused on these were really cogs in the machine, right? They to their credit, they should continue to be looked into, but they're a mere symptom of the larger organization. And the Q was a crash course. They use these individuals to illustrate how the networks worked. I think they deserve to be put on trial in federal prison, but for participating. But ultimately, the system itself is what has to be cut off. I think a lot of the talk in this new national security strategy and the re-evocation of the Monroe Doctrine is very much a part of this. It's a part of cutting off this whole system that is very much run from overseas. And it's kind of like a severing of that. And you're going to bring back the American worker, you bring back American sovereignty, and you start stripping away that system. But yeah, dude, the Q drops broke down a lot of that stuff. And then they kind of paved the way to be able to talk about it now here in 2025.
Damn straight. Trump actually set us up as well a little bit for this conversation. He put out a recent truth today. A lot of what we've mentioned, but I think some of the wording in here is actually interesting. Trump says, while the United States has other methods of charging tariffs against foreign countries, many of whom for years have taken advantage of our nation, the current method of tariffing before the United States Supreme Court is far more direct, less cumbersome, and much faster. All ingredients necessary for a strong and decisive national security result. Speed, power, and certainty are at all times important factors in getting the job done in a lasting and victorious manner. I've settled 8 wars in 10 months because of the rights clearly given to the President of the United States. If countries didn't think these rights existed, they would have said so loud and clear. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So how does that hit you?
Oh man, it's funny because I didn't see that beforehand, but we've been talking about a lot of all those dynamics. Yeah. And he's just openly talking about the concepts that were very foreign to us back in the day. You know what I'm waiting for is, there is one element of the Q drops that hasn't really reached mainstream, right? We talk about, they broke down the banks, they talk about individuals, they very much broke down like Spygate and stuff like that. They also kind of showed us the occult element to the deep state apparatus.
Yep.
And that's still huge. Pretty highly ignored by the mainstream media, Congress, most in the alt media. I don't think people realize what that layer means, what occult effigy burnings at Bohemian Grove in front of all these high level executives mean, along with, there's real allegations of murder and sacrifice there as well. With the initiation ritual to a skull and bones, having to get naked in a casket and everything else that high-powered officials go through. What that means, rubbing elbows with artists, Marina Abramovic, who stand in burning pentagrams and write blood curses on the walls. There is an element past like trade deals and keeping us poor that I think will be a final boss at some point when we get past this very real layer that we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I go back and forth. A lot of this is because of the Epstein shit show. And I don't blame Trump for this. I more mean the narrative of Epstein has become such a shit show that it just makes me wonder where we are going, if anywhere, publicly on the occult stuff. Because I totally agree with you that was really foundational to the drops, not just Epstein, but the idea of occult practices, the cabal. Because I think to people like us and people watching this show, people who follow the drops, we are different than even... That's why I call them the layers of the collective mind. Like there's the alt media that is willing to talk about tariffs. There's America First people that are willing to talk about American sovereignty and onshoring and first principles and like all good stuff that we're talking about tonight. And if you start talking about satanic rituals, Kabbalistic belief systems, they either laugh it off or they don't want to go down those trails. And it does make me wonder, have the Patriots cracked a means of getting that to the public in the way a lot of us originally thought? I don't know, but I do think...
Well, they've clearly like assessed it and they're holding back. You know, obviously
it does
people
feel like
said
that.
Like, it's not time because a lot of that hasn't even been cracked out. I mean, dude, freaking Tony Podesta was invited personally, had his brother John, who was freaking chief of staff to Clinton, invited personally to a spirit cooking dinner with a lady who's on camera carving pentagrams into her fucking stomach. Yeah. I feel like there should be a conversation about this, you know, like, but it hasn't cracked yet. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's what I mean is that I want it to, and I just wonder. I wonder aloud if a lot of us believed that, you know, crimes against children will unite humanity. Certainly should, certainly can. And I go back and forth, you know, there's a lot of truisms. There's a lot of like, I don't want to call them slogans, but real calling cards, first principles laid out in the Q drops, as you know.
Yeah.
One of those is crimes against children unite humanity. Another one, though, is choice to know will be yours. And I often go back and forth on those things, right? Of like, where does one of those end and the other begin?
True.
I don't have a criticism of it. It's more just the same story that is telling us crimes against children is what's going to unite humanity is telling us the choice to know will be yours. And it's like, well, that implies like an end of a rollout. You know, and it's like, so there are times I think we at least have to make peace with the idea, if it's possible, that it was the choice for us to know that, and for us to react accordingly and act accordingly. But I would like to believe we get to a place where some of these figures that you mentioned, Podestas, etc., can be used as real examples. Again, the statistics you were mentioning on the southern border, I've talked about that recently. It's a positive of saying Trump has been dismantling massive child trafficking networks.
Yeah.
You know, you listen to any Tom Homan press conferences, he's going to tell you all about that. But it does seem like people, including in the truth community, maybe even more so than they're willing to admit, are drawn to the characters, right? They're drawn to like, what happened on that island? What happened in that elite circle? What happened in the tunnels, right? Like, rather than what happened to those 200,000 missing kids on the border. Those two things are connected, but I don't know how much further we'll go. I mean, I think we should keep going, but
I don't know. I just wonder if they'll ever do that, or if that's just up for us to spread amongst our friends. Like, I don't know if it'll make the mainstream, but I feel like it's gotten swept under the rug a little bit, since now there hasn't even been Q drops in 5 years. And I don't want to forget it. Like, there were things like, dude, especially Bohemian Grove used to have all these high name officials they're like, oh, it's not a real effigy. Dude, you have guys in robes doing a ritual burning of I guess, fake human effigy. Totally weird. Totally needs to be talked about. Like occultism, or even, the Epstein stuff. There was a temple on there and people were saying that there were other shit. There's just weird shit with kids. Even stuff with like Hillary Clinton. She's technically a part of the Wing Coven. And you're like, oh, it's ceremonial. They asked her.
Yeah.
Well, she did it. She's technically a part of a effing witch coven. There's just a lot of things. And William Cooper used to say, kind of when he would talk about the occult aspect, is like, you might not think it's real. Like, I think it's goofy. I'm sure you do too. But it's like, but they do. Like, and you get to these, like, you read like some of those early WikiLeaks before they started locking them down and stuff. They seem to think it's real. And I don't think, I think that's another layer that, is something will happen in the future with that.
I agree, and I think it has to. I wrote I shouldn't say it has to. It doesn't have to on our terms, but I think it needs to be in people's faces that this stuff happened and how depraved it was and how widespread it was. Because I do think it's a thing that connects the quote unquote elite. I've said this before, but there's like walls, I think cognitive dissonance walls you hit with normies who even try to follow you into truth topics where they just can't understand the world being in the state it is just through greed alone. I often hit this with like liberal family members where they're like, is it really just money? And that's why you're saying that this cabal is doing what it is and the globalists have taken over and they foment wars and everything? Like, is it really just money? For some of them, I think it is. But I think besides the fact that we want justice for the children and justice for these things that have happened, there's a real logos to what the drops laid out and connecting the occult to this evil. And this is going to sound weird, but for me, it started as a big negative. Of course, this stuff is horrible. But it ended up making me feel more encouraged about humanity by thinking, man, it isn't that evil is just ubiquitous across humanity. It's actually that it is this small percentage of depraved individuals that have fomented this kind of programming and conditioning. Now, they've spread it. The School of Americas, you look into any of that shit with Intel, ISIS, all these terrorist organizations. But the weird, encouraging thing is that you tie all their strings back to the same programmers. That means that, I've always said this, but I really feel this way, especially now that I have a son. Like, they don't come out that way. Nobody comes out that way. You just don't fucking come out that way. It has to be done to you. And that's horrible, but I think it's also a weird, encouraging thing that I took out of the drops.
Hey, dude, I nailed it. Absolutely nailed it. And this is an early revelation that I had where, you get initially red-pilled and some people just run with it and they don't even think about it. And I was kind of that way. But then you start running into people who really depresses them. And they just like, oh my God, the world is like this. But one of the things I realized was this shouldn't depress you. This should excite you, because especially if you were in one of those places where you just felt like the world was caving in and all of a sudden it's like everywhere you turn, it's anti-white shit and anti-men stuff and anti-this and anti that. And you're like, okay, the whole world hates me. I don't know. I felt like I was pretty normal. And you start realizing, oh, it was all manufactured. Oh, it wasn't real. Like, this isn't just like a natural coalescing of society into these things. It was completely manufactured, which is actually a good thing, because that means, well, it can be demanufactured.
Absolutely.
Good for your factory album, by the way.
if it can be engineered, it can be reverse engineered. And that seems to be what Trump is doing. I know you got to get ready for your next show. I told Brad to give him about an hour break before Q After Hours. But I'll leave the floor.
Super popular new show. Guys, no big deal.
It is.
I want to hang out.
I'll leave you with your final thoughts here on the subject of Q. And we're coming to the end of 2025. You've just started this new show, joined the new show, Q After Hours.
Yeah.
And, you know, we have talked a lot, positively and negatively, at Badlands about some in the Q movement and some of our thoughts on it, evolving thoughts on it. How do you feel as like an OG Q guy coming back to it in a way that maybe you haven't as much? Like, you know, you've always talked about the Q jobs, but I mean, lately you're like diving back in. Has anything changed on a fundamental level, positively or negatively?
Yeah, positively. Well, first of all, it feels really good. I feel like this second term, a lot of times through a lot of my research, there are a lot of things where I'm like, man, that's a second term deal. And I naively thought the second term was going to start in 2021. But I was like, you know, that's a down the road thing. And boy, I feel like it's really ramping up. And a lot of the things that were laid out there, I mean, you're looking at this memorandum we were just talking about for most of this show. That's kind of pushing along the ways of the things we were expecting it to go. And, you know, for most of the Biden years, I'd mentioned a drop here or there, but I kind of backed off. It was kind of like towards the end of those drops, they themselves were like, drop all references. You guys go, you don't need the branding anymore. You know, you're doing the work, just do the work and talk about it. And then they stopped. And then there were no new drops. I mean, there was a couple in 2022, but I mean, aside from that, there was nothing for 5 years. And it just seemed to me like counterproductive. It seemed like a reach, let's say that, to really try and tie everything into them. And so I just kind of stopped. I would mention them when they were on Brad and Abby Live. We would actually we'd mention them from time to time when we felt like one was relevant, but I didn't really dive in. Now, boy, man, I gotta tell you, things are starting to like ramp up, and they really are starting to hit. It's not even necessarily like, oh, this is a delta. They said this exactly however many years ago. Yeah, I think they aim for deltas, but for the most part, they kind of laid out the general idea of what they were doing, and now they're clearly doing it. And yeah, they were obviously doing things in the first term. It was freaking awesome, but that was more on a regular doing presidential things where we're like, holy shit, this is a really great president. Now he's going above and beyond. So I've been really enjoying it, and I feel like we're in future proves past lands. So yeah, it's been I think therapeutic to me and a lot of fun kind of digging back into them in relation to what the Trump administration 2.0 is doing.
Yeah, and I know I've that's well said, and I think I've tried to make this clear, but one of the things for me has been the difference between what I think you guys do, you and Alpha and Josh, and you're not the only ones. I like our friend Q Alerts there on True Social. There's a lot of people.
Yeah, he's a good dude.
Arrived. Yeah, the Storm has arrived is a great one. Patriots in Control. Yeah. There's so many of these, you know, OGs. There's a difference between what some do, where I think deltas can be good. They can be encouraging. Future proves fast is a real thing, but I think I like Q content personally that is taking the delta, right? Let's say it's like, hey, we got a match. This is a callback. This was clearly a future proves past. Now, what do we think the drops were trying to get us to look at? What do we think the drops were trying to get us to understand about this situation? That's what I like. And I feel like it should be obvious, but there's a lot of people who I think in the last few years in particular turned it into saying, look at this delta, look at this delta, look at this delta. And I'm sitting there going, yeah, we know that the drops are real. Like, you either know the drops are real or you don't.
Yeah.
What are you saying about the delta? What are you saying about the connection? What do you think the drops meant? And I think a lot of what we talked about tonight even is an example of that, right? Where we're saying the drops were projecting this war against the system, this war against the bankers, against globalists. Now, future is proving the past. Okay, we don't stop there. We have a conversation about what needs to change. What has the problem been? And I think that's what you're laying out there. And I think there's a difference there. I think it's subtle, but you know, as Chris Paul would say, I don't think the point of the awakening was to play match. It was to understand the principles and the lessons that were being threaded into those drops in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. And I've made points like this. Seldom I tried to stay back a little bit because I do feel like Listen, to each his own. I'm not a part of Q team. No one's briefed me on shit. I don't know, so I don't want to necessarily speak for them. But then there's been times where I'm like, this is goofy. You're just playing match game. That's the perfect way of putting it. And people at times when I push back on that, like, what happened to you? Because they just remember the vague, like, I followed this guy because he had a Q symbol and called himself Where We Go and We Go All. They forget, I've been salty about this since the beginning. I was never doing predictions. In fact, I talk shit on predictions since 2018 because I always thought, well, first of all, you're just guessing. So it's like, you're going to be wrong. What do you get if you win? Sometimes. It doesn't matter. Yeah, right. Yeah, sometimes you'll be right. Sometimes you'll be wrong. You're just pissing in the wind. And there were people, even in real time, when I was like, really, the drops were rolling, and I was in real time covering them on my YouTube channel, where people would be like, I put out a video, and there'd be some in the comments who'd say, why aren't you covering the new drops? But they forget, like, I never did that. I never was just like, hey, here are the new drops of the day, and I read them, and there was some pages I loved that did do that, but I dug on them. I just used them as leads, and I'd be like, hey, I don't know what the new drops from today say, even though I probably read them, but I haven't dug into them. But you know those drops from last week? Look what I found. And then here's like a little mini dig on, 5 sentences from a Q drop a week ago. And I always thought that was the point of them, to use them to say, what can we find with this?
Right. This is a map to find something.
Yeah, exactly. So,
it's almost like some people take the treasure map and they're like, look, I figured out what this symbol, like there's this symbol and there's this symbol and there's this symbol. And it's like, yeah, where is it leading? Where's the map leading?
Dude, yeah. Let's go. 100%, man.
Well said, man. Well, it's great content. I don't get to watch a lot of anybody's content at Badlands, but I was watching I think it was the first or second episode of After Hours, and you did a dig on Kirill Dmitriev and some connections to the Sovereign Alliance. That was great. So again, a lot of this stuff is so much better in hindsight. So I think it's a good time for it. So that is at 12 a.m. Eastern, probably like 2 in the afternoon for Brad, wherever he is these days.
Yep, I will see. Yeah, I will see you guys at 8 p.m. Alaska time, aka 54 minutes from now.
All right, man. Thanks a lot for joining, and I'll see you next time. And maybe I'll still be on to raid people over there. If not, then
if not, I'll just do it. So fuck.
All right, man.
Peace out, guys.
Thanks for joining. Thank you to Brad there for joining the show. Obviously, check out Q After Hours. Coming up right after this show. I'll try to raid you guys over there if I can remember how. I always forget how. I'll hang out with you guys for a little bit here. If you got any rants or anything like that you want to send over, please do. Or a boost. If you're watching on replay, you can send a boost over and I'll get that next time. There was actually one from last week that I'm going to grab now. From Misogynistic Chick. AI judge is greater than a rational, emotional, radical empath female judge. The code would have to be written so that it can never machine learn from any women's content so it doesn't pick up the lunacy. Remember when Google Gemini was first released? Yikes. A misogynistic chick, indeed. That was in reference to a new movie coming out soon called Mercy on Amazon Prime that seems to be a dystopian hellscape about a very scary AI judicial system. And I argued last week, wouldn't that be way better than a human judicial system? I mean, it doesn't freak anybody out that the last line of defense between you and a jail cell or you and justice is just what a judge thinks about the argument or even a jury. I don't know. I think we've been a little hoodwinked by that kind of stuff. I'm going to grab a couple of little topics, famous last words. By the way, guys, I'm going to post this in the chat. Chris Paul and I did Eyes Wide Shut like 2 years ago on Story Hour, and somebody in the chat said that John and Zach are going to be doing a whole show about Eyes Wide Shut and what it symbolizes and everything in light of the Epstein narrative on Baseless Conspiracies Monday night. So if you want to do the real homework and the real movie lore by people who know what they're talking about, watch the old episode of Story Hour with me and Chris, and then you can watch that. And speaking of Story Hour, Casino Royale 2006. Don't watch Skyfall. Casino Royale, that's your movie for Tuesday night. Best Bond villain of all time, Le Chiffre. And best portrayal of Bond of all time, although I am partial to Pierce Brosnan, the original Daniel Craig Bond movie is the best Bond movie, and it has been subverted ever since. So, let's hit a word from our sponsors, which is us, and then I'll do a couple little extended thoughts on this new Trump doctrine, specifically when it comes to our friends and our so-called allies.
Before skincare went synthetic, people used something simple, something real, tallow. Grass-fed and finished beef tallow is packed with vitamins A, D, E, and K. Nutrients your skin actually knows what to do with. It locks in moisture, restores elasticity, and defends against winter dryness. No water, no preservatives, and no BS. Unlike plant oils or chemical creams, tallow mimics your skin's own structure. Elbows, hands, knees, post-shave, anywhere your skin's crying for real moisture. Perfect for gifting or keeping your own skin soft when the cold hits. Visit softdisclosure.com and use promo code Badlands for 15% off. Ancient care, modern truth.
Soft disclosure.
Soft disclosure. Thank you guys for the continued support for Soft Disclosure and Annie there on Willow Wind Farms. It's, it's very obvious to say, but literally every product you guys buy through there, it helps us. It helps her. It helps the farm. It literally helps Badlands. It helps all the shows, everybody here. And that's the kind of sustainable foundation that we really haven't been able to build in the media world. This stuff is extremely volatile to the upside and to the downside. It's been tough in 2025 for a lot of people. I don't think it's unique to us. A lot of people buddy, you gotta make a choice. He's knows my guest is gone. He's trying to lead me upstairs. But yeah, we appreciate when you guys support us. Whatever it is, if it's rants, if it's boosts, I know it's Christmas. I know the economy's been tough. That's one of the tight ropes Trump has been navigating. We appreciate any support you guys can give us. And if you can't, then that's okay. Just hit the thumbs up button because it really does help. Like if everybody that's watching right now, 3,800 people hit the thumbs up button, that'd be awesome. And we don't even have to use bots to do it, which is maybe a thing that happens. What was I gonna say? Note on Bond. I totally get and respect the conversation about Sean Connery and stuff like that, and I won't begrudge anybody their favorite Bond. I'll go into this in more detail on Tuesday night, but what I'm suggesting about Daniel Craig is not that he is objectively the best Bond. It's that he is much closer to the idea of Bond as portrayed in Ian Fleming's original novel, which, if you didn't know, is Casino Royale. So the Bond portrayed by Daniel Craig in 2006 was not liked by many Bond enthusiasts. The irony of that, not to be a hipster about it, but is that the Sean Connery Bond is a Sean Connery Bond. There's a Hollywood Bond, and then there was the Bond in the comics, who was kind of, some people would call him a psychopath, but, it really depends on your framing. He really was a tool of nameless and faceless intel states, and the novel is a lot more subtle about whether or not Bond is the good guy. And I don't find it to be in a subversive way. It's really kind of showing you almost the terror of a man that capable, not just of killing and of espionage and everything like that, but of wooing women and being desirable. And I don't think it's a giant rug pull of he was the bad guy the whole time, but it shows you like the mechanization of a man and the end result of turning a man into a modern weapon, a clandestine weapon, one who can walk in different worlds. I think that goes both ways. It can go positive or negative. But if you watch that portrayal of James Bond by Daniel Craig in 2006, there's a mirrored way you can watch that movie and have some sympathy for Le Chef and the Bond that he comes into contact with, because that movie takes on the impression of two predators hunting each other, but that Bond is actually the more disembodied and emotionless predator in the script, which is kind of, that gives you a little spoiler of where I'm going to take that discussion. And then I think that the studios and the writers didn't like that people were really starting to grab onto the Daniel Craig portrayal of Bond. So they started to subvert him and make him question his past and all this kind of stuff. So anyway, interesting stuff. Couple things I thought were of note in the reaction to the national security strategy that came out of Trump this week is our friends in Europe. And this is fantastic for something I wrote in July. Now, this is nothing new to people that are familiar with my writing, but in July, I kind of put a name to it, like I am wont to do. July, I wrote this article on burningbright.substack.com. Oops, just messed myself up. Called Axis and Allies Flirting with War on the Path to Peace. But I named a term in here, the Axis and Allies inversion. And this was a theory that was not meant to codify the Sovereign Alliance. You know, I think you either believe that or you don't. If you're watching this show, then you probably believe it's a thing. They're pretty much naming it now openly. The Axis and Allies inversion was something I wrote because I'm trying to project with this show and with a lot of my thinking, what is the next narrative? What are the next macro narratives coming out of our side? What is going to be the reaction out of the enemy faction? Or what's the narrative construction going to be out of the enemy faction, and what is our reaction to that going to be? I think narratives create paradigms because they engage the mindscape. They engage the collective mind. The collective mind essentially is the public mandate, which is the battle space, and we literally create reality. I mean, that's just, it just is. The easiest example of this, it's not to be like a woo-woo new age yoga mom thing. It's not manifestation, it's actualization and it's reality creation. Look at the COVID pandemic. You guys have probably heard me many times, especially in conversations with Chris Paul, say, for all the people that talk about that being a fake pandemic, and I would be one of them, you're actually wrong, because the world acted as if there had been a real pandemic because the public mandate was shifted to the point where there was. What does it matter if there was not actually a pandemic if your neighbors and your schools and your businesses and your cities and your governments and your own families acted and behaved as if there was a pandemic? You were living within a pandemic. So that was entirely narrative. It was a false reality constructed on the basis of narrative, which requires buy-in to energize the reality construction. Reality requires public buy-in to collapse into reality. And if it loses public buy-in, it starts to dissolve, which is, as First Fire says in the chat, one of the core tenets of Operation Warp Speed is destroying that false reality via accelerationism. So the Axis and Allies inversion was a term I coined to put a name to a macro that I think is developing and accelerating in 2025. And damn, did it accelerate ahead of schedule, in my estimation, with this twin deployment of the Monroe Doctrine and Trump's new 2025 national security strategy. The idea is not me being a Hitler bro and saying, invert everything you thought you knew about the world wars. The Axis were the good guys, the Allies were the bad guys. There are some people who would go that far. That is not what I believe. I believe that that was the most successful, hopefully never repeatable example or version of the controlled opposition dynamic that they did back to back to reset, to get us into the fourth turning, to reset the global battle space. It was a banker's war, as many are now openly talking about these days, which Brad alluded to earlier in the show. That's not what the Axis and Allies inversion is. I had said there is a new Axis being branded, which means there's a new Axis being created in the info war. I named this new Axis the villains we need. And I wrote about this recently as well. There's some good stuff over there. You guys can go check it out. burningbright.substack.com. And I had even projected that the media was going to start using the term new Axis. And they have. We talked about that in the summer. They started using the term new Axis, and I said who was going to be named in it. Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. Of course, they want to put Donald Trump in that, but they know they can't really do that. There's not enough mandate, there's not enough buy-in for them to label Trump and Axis power. So what they're instead doing is they're labeling him an ally to the new Axis, or a pleb of the new Axis, a proxy of the new Axis. So my idea was, well, patriots, Donald Trump is going to have to reverse engineer this narrative construction in order to halt the reality it's trying to construct. And I thought he would do that by inverting the Axis and Allies paradigm. And one of this was really awakened, oddly enough, through my memory of a 1987 Donald Trump interview with David Letterman, in which he referred to our, quote, so-called allies. And he was referring to Japan at the time, but also in a larger context, he was referring to Europe, England and Germany specifically, trade deals. He's been talking about this, you guys know, since the 80s. But he called them our so-called allies. And if you kind of look for Trump's recent statements, even before the national security strategy and the Monroe Doctrine, he has been calling them our so-called allies. Even going back to his first term, he was talking about the G7, the G20. He recently refused to go to the G20. America was not represented at the G20, nor was who? Russia and China. Nor did the U.S. go to the COP, was it the COP 20 or the COP 7 or whatever the fuck it was in Brazil? That gay Greta Thunberg, circle jerk about global climate bullshit. I think that's all over. I think everybody understands that that's over. We didn't represent there, nor did China, nor did Russia. We're the big three. The big three, the trinity of the sovereign alliance. It's not what they're doing that is making them converge in the collective mind. It's what they're not doing. And what they're not doing is copying to these globalist humiliation rituals. They're removing their participation. They're removing their nation state mandate and buy-in, which is getting their respective peoples to remove their nations, their mandate and their buy-in. So the Axis and Allies inversion has been projecting that in the months and years ahead, we are going to see a slow, but in the context of nation states, a relatively rapid about face on our allies by Donald Trump that will make a de facto alliance codified with the sovereign alliance. We know there's a sovereign alliance. We know Trump is on good terms with Mohammed bin Salman and Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, especially Putin and Xi Jinping are the ones he still kayfabes with. But most of the American people, including most of the conservative sphere, if you guys talk to conservative friends and family, they don't like the China and Russia connections. They might have a pragmatic mindset that, oh, well, it's good if Trump can avoid war with these madmen. But, we'd rather him be on good terms with them than bad terms with them. But, Russia and China are not like us. So that's where they kind of draw the line. That's where a lot of traditional conservatives draw the line. I think that Trump is going toward a... Go lay down, buddy. Lay down. Come here. What is your problem? Hey. Come on, buddy. Disaster. He doesn't understand when I'm in the middle of a flow. So I've been saying that Trump needs to invert the Allies paradigm before taking aim and basically inverting the Axis paradigm. The prediction was that the Allies was going to come first, our so-called allies. Look at the reactions to Trump's national security strategy. First of all, he forwards it on the back of the celebration of the Monroe Doctrine anniversary, 250th. Pretty interesting that we're coming right up on the 250th of the nation itself, which is pretty great. Or he was saying it was part of the 250th celebration. I thought this was... Actually, I'll get to how retarded this is next. Here was a couple of amazing little... bits of panic out of the media. Trump's new national security strategy stuns mainstream in saying Europe faces civilizational erasure within 20 years. It warns that some of America's oldest allies in Europe face, quote, the real and more stark prospect of civilizational erasure as a result of unchecked immigration, as well as the erosion of democratic principles, alongside calling out irresponsible and unchecked EU immigration policies. Further cites the curbing of free speech, which we will also get to in a moment. Also, with the support for EU censorship excesses by transnational elite institutions, describing that, quote, should present trends continue, the continent will be unrecognizable in 20 years or less. It is far from obvious whether certain European countries will have economies and militaries strong enough to remain reliable allies to the United States. It also referenced a lack of self-confidence by Europe, which is most evident in Europe's relationship with Russia. It's cited as evidence that Europe should have a clear, significant hard power advantage over Russia, but now European leaders regard Russia as an existential threat. He says he blames European officials for thwarting U.S. efforts to end the war in Ukraine and accuses governments of ignoring the large European majority who want peace. Managing European relations with Russia will require significant U.S. diplomatic engagement, both to reestablish conditions of strategic stability across the Eurasian landmass and to mitigate the risk of conflict between Russia and the European states. I mean, this is stuff we've been talking about on this show and since I started writing in this stuff for literal years. Donald Trump is going to onboard Russia into the collective Western mind as a pragmatist and a peacemaker, but on the way there, the bridge that's going to be burned is the globalist conception of the EU. The EU, where we're going, I believe, de facto or actual, and I'm leaning toward actual, NATO and the EU will no longer exist. Europe will exist, and I've written about extensively in recent months. What's going to start that on a narrative level? In my opinion, it's going to be Hungary and Slovakia. I think are going to be the ones to make the first big moves in NATO and in the EU, or out of NATO and the EU. But they're doing that on the back of the Trump Doctrine. The Trump Doctrine is a revival of the Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine was a response to European empire, which is the heart of the deep state. The American deep state is neutered. They have no power. The European deep state, where they fucked up, this is where I think they fucked up huge over the last century. And this ties into John's devolution research. When they don't have the American military at their disposal, they don't have any actual power projection. As Trump says in the national security strategy, their hard power projection capabilities are de facto null and void if they cannot get the American military engaged in a global conflict. They never thought she would lose has so much more to do with devolution, in my view, and with control over the U.S. military than anything else. Because if you can control the U.S. military, all you need is the right story to get them into a war. That's why the Russians, in particular, and the Chinese could never make sovereign moves to a point over the last 20 years. 20 for Russia, 10 for China. I think China's only been in sovereign hands for about 10 years, maybe 12. Russia, I think, going back to the very late 90s, has been in its sovereign upheaval and revival. And if you read between the lines here, like a lot of normie conservatives, I think, and normie MAGA are looking at these statements and like, yeah, get Europe, get them. They're being annoying. They're fucking gay, whatever. I think there's so much more signal to this that Trump is telling you the enemy is our so-called allies. And now we are at the place, this is why I felt so positive this week about the messaging. I feel positive about the Great Awakening. Anybody who reads my stuff, despite a small group of retards claiming that we're all negative here, I'm pretty positive when it comes to the Great Awakening itself and where we're all going. But this week, when I see the narrative shift out of Trump, it shows me that he knows we're at a new point, or that we need to be at a new point and a new foundation on which to build the next set of chapters. And he's now talking directly to the American people and to the European people, Canadians, whoever it is, as part of this globalist superstate, and saying, we no longer recognize you. Going so far as to say that literally you're going to be unrecognizable in 20 years. So we're not negotiating with you anymore. But I will manage your relations with Russia, which is also what we've been saying here forever. So it's very encouraging. I wrote an article in August, I think, called The Invisible Enemy, talking about that in the context of NATO and Europe. And, you know, again, Ukraine is really the keystone here on a narrative level, partly on an actual level, but really on a narrative level, of translating that, I think, to the American people. Trump is translating, look at who wants peace. The Americans want peace, the Russians want peace, and little by little, inch by inch, deployment by deployment, the Ukrainians want peace. Who doesn't? Every time there's any narrative that gets baited out there, and I do think they're bait, about will they, won't they? Zelensky's advisors meet with Trump's advisors in Miami, including Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff. I don't think these are real negotiations. They're narrative deployments, but whatever. You can think of it however you want. What does Europe do on the back of that? They say we need to protect Zelensky at all costs from the Americans. Protect him from what? Protect him from peace. They need to protect Ukraine from peace. They need to protect the world from peace, which means they need war. I mean, and they're getting close to saying that. So, little stopover reference here. Elon Musk, by the way, if any of you bought into the feud between Musk and Trump, I called you retarded at the time. You remain retarded. We do forgive, but we don't forget. The Fourth Reich, just out of nowhere, on the back of this national security strategy. Sure, it has nothing to do with it. I'm sure these guys aren't coordinating messaging from opposite sides of the zeitgeist. But Elon Musk strikes back at the EU tyrants after X fine. Elon Musk is not taking the outrageous fine from Brussels bureaucrats lying down, lashing out at EU officialdom for taking on Nazi characteristics and oppressing their own citizens' best interests. Elon says the tyrannical, unelected bureaucracy oppressing the people of Europe are in the second picture. This is Europe. This is the EU. Brussels and Strasbourg. I mean, How about this one? An X account on December 7th says Fourth Reich, puts a little swastika underneath the European Union flag, and Elon Musk says pretty much the same week of Trump's national security strategy that lays out an economic defense matrix against Europe. That's a pincer move. That's what that is. That's a narrative pincer move. And guess what? They noticed. This is why I always say you can learn a lot watching things lie. The tenor of their lies will teach you much. Wall Street Journal, one of the papers of record. The US flips history by casting Europe, not Russia, as villain in the new security policy. An annual strategy document which has described threats from China to Russia now directs some of its harshest language at NATO allies. Well, isn't that, man, how strange. How strange this terminology. Russia is not the villain? Europe is the villain? What about China? Does that remind you of this? The villains we need? The total inversion of the New World Order? The US flips history by casting Europe, not Russia, as villain? The Axis and Allies inversion? It's not just meant to be a victory lap, guys. And going back to this goodie, this oldie but goodie from way back in September. Trump and from The Guardian, the hub of globalistdom in Europe. Trump and Putin are carrying out a pincer on Europe's democracies. Suddenly, it all feels a bit 1939. There it is. They knew it was coming. They knew the narrative pivot was coming 2 months after I said it was coming, and 2 months before it did come. So, the timeline war is a real thing, and, if there's somebody watching this show who has not read the Righteous Russia series, that's how I got my start. It holds up. I think people in chat will tell you who have read it. It holds up. Here's a link to it. The hyperlink is kind of weird because it was originally titled something different. So what I say in this original thing that I wrote in the info war, I use a specific term. I can think of no greater story than an alliance of East and West, and no more terrifying a nationalistic sovereign pincer for the globalist deep state to be caught in than one between the talons of an eagle and the fangs of a tiger. Now, some people call the Russians a bear, but I've always called them a Siberian tiger. It is what it is. Potato, potato, pa-tiger, pa-bear. I said that there was going to be a pincer move between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin in 2022, and I said that pincer move was going to be directed at Europe. And now Europe is telling you that Trump and Putin are affecting a pincer movement against them. Now, I also want to call somebody else retarded. And I always tell you guys, I pay attention to the alt media. These are some strange retards. This guy, Andrew Korobko, he runs a Substack. He's a let's go to his Substack directly. He understands a lot of what's going on a normie, how do I say this? On like a alt media reading, hipster, total inversion premise. So he thinks the US are the bad guys and thinks the Ukrainians are the bad guys and that the Russians are the good guys. But he thinks he's one of these con Inc. kind of thinkers who thinks Trump is an idiot, who fell ass backwards into everything he's done. So the reason I say this is because he says the U.S. new national security strategy details how Trump 2.0 will respond to multipolarity. I'm not going to rip his whole theory apart here, but this guy understands 90% of the battlefield and totally misses the premise. As Brad and I talked about tonight, the national security strategy that Donald Trump laid out was not a response to multipolarity, which is how Korobko is laying it out. The alt media some of these guys who understand that NATO is bad and all that, right? He gets that. But he thinks the US is still part of that hegemon. He isn't seeing all this breaking from the hegemon. He thinks Trump is responding to the multipolar alliance. The national security strategy is an endorsement of and codification of the multipolar alliance, aka the sovereign alliance. They just don't want to say the word, guys. We all know what's happening. They just don't want to say it. They don't want this head to get too big. So there's a subtle retardation happening in like the alt media sector where they are so convinced of many of the things we are, NATO and the EU and all of that, globalism bad, Russia actually not bad, etc. But they can't get it through their heads that Donald Trump knows what he's doing. And how do you create a de facto multipolar alliance? You have to accelerate multipolarity. How do you accelerate multipolarity? You kick off a global economic war. That's how you get a multipolar game board. That's what they're doing. It's a mutual war over trade. And who loses in that system? The system itself. And the ones who are emblematic of that system is the EU, represented by Brussels, Strasbourg, name your, Britain, the empire. They can't survive on it. They don't have real militaries. They don't have real democracies. They don't have real republics. They don't own their own energy. Most of their energy infrastructure comes from Russia and the US, liquefied natural gas. They don't have any real power. As Trump says in the NSS, the hard power projection capabilities of these people is non-existent. There's no negotiation happening here. What Trump is doing in the NSS is he's telling Europe, we're going in this direction. We are going in this direction. Russia's already going in that direction. China's going in that direction. We're all going to be over there. And if you don't join us over there, you are going to collapse into a hellscape feedback loop, and you're going to be torn apart by your own peoples. That's what's going to happen. That is what will happen in Europe. So I think it's pretty exciting. I think it's also interesting that they are turning on our boy Z. We've been monitoring this turn for a long time. This is adjacent to what I'm talking about here, but has a little addendum. Volodymyr Zelensky says he had long and substantive peace talks with Witkoff Kushner. So Zelensky feels like things are going pretty good. We're getting closer and closer to peace. We agreed on the next steps and formats for talks with the United States. That's our boy Z. But you know who's upset? The New York Times. Zelensky's government sabotaged oversight, allowing corruption to fester. Zelensky systematically sabotaged Ukraine anti-corruption efforts. Well, that's odd. He sabotaged anti-corruption efforts, even though the two top officials under Zelensky are now in exile. And where did they go to exile, guys? Where did they go? Zelensky's chief of staff, Andriy Yermak, resigned last month after the corruption scandal, which Zelensky kicked off. Hours after police raided his home, it's reported that he had left for Israel, of which he is a citizen. Huh. That is so odd. A Ukrainian? Well, I'm sure it's just an isolated... Wait a second. Businessman Timur Mindich, who co-founded the entertainment company with Zelensky, allegedly led the embezzlement scheme. Mindich also escaped... Wait a second. Hold on a second. Hold on. He escaped to Israel, where he enjoys citizenship. Huh. Separate raid. Now, man, I mean, I'm no ghost, but that's kind of interesting, isn't it? And then we've got the New York Times being a little unhappy about this anti-corruption purge. And then we have a little more color. Corrupt Kyiv. While Russia advances, Kyiv collapses politically. A major corruption scandal has emerged, implicating many of the top political leaders around military dictator Zelensky. The accusations involve kickbacks, bribes, blah, 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 blah. This is the same racket. Now think of the New York Times. Think of the New York Times, guys. And now read this stuff. This is where you have to put your inversion goggles on. You can learn a lot from these stories if you don't allow yourself to believe what the stupid, dumb, retard authors believe. You can still learn a lot. Look at this passage. Think of it in the context of our boy Z. This is the same racket that Hunter Biden and the Biden crime family conducted from 2014 to 22, but on a larger scale. One key figure close to Zelensky has already fled to Israel, which has no extradition treaties. Zelensky's top aide has recently resigned, another one who went to Israel. All signs point to Zelensky himself being implicated in this scandal. Of course he is. Our boy Z doesn't mean he's a good guy. It means he's our fucking guy, and he better like it, or he better put his gimp mask back on. You know what I'm saying? The only real scandal is why this current scandal wasn't revealed earlier. Corruption's been going on in the Ukraine for over 30 years. A lot of the corrupt money was being funneled back to the Democratic Party, which is why the US never pursued the matter under Obama or Biden. When Trump tried raising the issue in 2019, he was impeached for discussing it on the phone. The perfect phone call. The implication is that the US is now allowing the investigation to move forward because it's time for Zelensky to move to one of his mansions in Miami, Dubai, or Spain. So I think it's pretty interesting that the New York Times is very upset with Volodymyr Zelensky on the back of all of his Israelis fleeing his cabinet while he hunts them down on behalf of Donnie T. Anyway, interesting stuff there, I think. I hope you think. I think, and I hope that you think as well. Let me get some rants, then I will get out of here. Again, do your homework for Tuesday night. Casino Royale. It's a good break. You know, watch a Monday night movie. We're used to doing like Thursday night movies. Watch a Monday night movie. Get home, like, breaks up the week. Tricks you into thinking it's like Thursday or Friday night. Watch a Monday night movie, Casino Royale. Join us on Tuesday night. And then roll into the Q Boys. Tom Terrific 54 sent $25 over for the Mooks. I did say tonight's guest was some Mook, and I feel like a lot of you guys knew who it was. Thanks, Tom. Harry Vetch, we've been hoodwinked for centuries now. In the end, this is good versus evil. Go back to Genesis. Damn straight. We have Appalachian well water, sediment filtered 4 times with drinking water filtered 3 times, plus RO. I don't know what that is. Cleanest, best water ever. Sweet. And then the war of northern aggression was completely about keeping the states under global control. Now I know. I didn't know it at the time, but You know, I think we all kind of know that now. And it could be argued, as I spoke about with my friend Matt Errett a couple weeks ago on the show, that the Americans and the Russians were trying to work together and get all this multipolarity figured out at the time. And then a dang old civil war broke out. Just inconvenient, you know. Violet Scott sent $20 over. Love the boiling the frog analogy. BB, you're a clone of my 30-year-old grandson. Everything about you, especially the blue eyes, with one exception, you are a great writer. Nothing can stop what's coming. Great show. Is your grandson a shit writer? Thank you. Appreciate that. Astro, by the way, I really appreciate the people who read my articles. They're not just rants. I actually I never know whether to take it as a compliment. Got a couple comments last week that were like, you know, I like your writing so much better than you on the shows. It's like, well, I guess that's good. It's good stuff, guys. And I appreciate the people who support me over there. I know not everybody can do that, but it's all free. We got some exciting stuff that we're trying to put into motion for the Badlands Substack in 2026, starting right in January. None of it, it's not totally set in stone yet, but I think what we're going to do is we're going to really lean into the current topics, because that's what you guys seem to like the best and respond to in the comments over there. The audiences cross over between Rumble and our Substack, but there are distinctive audiences there. So we also want to interact more with our Substack audience. Everything on badlands.substack.com is free. You can support us there. It helps us pay our writers. We also want to see if our engagement increases over there by making some of these moves. If it does, then we'll keep doing it. If it doesn't, then we'll pull back, right? Because it's time, it's resources, it's money to produce this stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the brief. We're going to try to refine it, work on it a bit. But Ash, myself, and Ghost are going to be delivering the brief Monday through Friday on that Substack, as we've been doing. So we're going to keep that shit coming. And then Saturdays, there are plans for an original show to go out. It could be called the Badlands Blitz. I'm probably going to host that. Famous last words. You heard it here first. A 1-hour show. Yeah, right. With me, Ghost, and Ash, we'll probably alternate. It'll be me and Ghost, me and Ash, maybe Ash and Ghost. But we're going to do that. It's going to be exclusive to the Substack. It's going to be free, but you got to subscribe to the Substack over there. We're just trying to give those subscribers something that they're getting. And we figure hitting it on a Saturday, we'll put the podcast out. We don't really have like a week in review thing at Badlands. And, you know, a lot of our shows kind of turn into stuff like that at times. But I think if we do an official one, it's something you can just put on Saturday, on Sunday, whatever, catch up, and something different. So we'll see if you guys like it. We're just experimenting, seeing if you guys like that direction. Substack's a great platform. We've wanted to do more with them just because they're, knock on wood, so far they've been, besides Rumble, like the least cancel-y of anybody that we've dealt with. So, you know, we want to reward Substack, and we also want to reward our subscribers over there. There's a lot of people who, you know, give donations over there or sign up for paid memberships on my Substack, on the Badlands Substack. It's really one of the best platforms that you guys support us on. And again, whether you do or not with money, you're still going to get the show. So hopefully you guys like it. Hopefully it comes together, still ironing that stuff out. You know, doing these things depends on the support, right? So if we can't keep doing it, I can't keep asking those guys or myself to spend the time. So yeah, keep an eye on that. Few weeks away from that launching, but that's the plan. Astro Emmy said $17 over. Great discussion. Thanks for the positive and hopeful view. We try, Astro. We try. No matter how people try to keep us down. We in the big leagues now. Nevada Runner sent $5 over. Appreciate that. Boom Diggity, $100. Spot on, BB. Trump finally unveiled who they is. Anglo-Dutch financial oligarchy, the old Venetian dogs. I think you're right. I don't think it's like one they, but yeah, I mean, I think it's the empire, right? It's like the British East India Company. It's the bankers. It's all the cliches. And the cabal is real, and the sex trafficking is real, and the globalist corruption is real, but all of it comes from the bankers. All of it comes from the merchants guilds, who the pirates stood opposed to, and the pirates were recast as evil. right? Until like Pirates of the Caribbean. Pirates of the Caribbean is a low-key base trilogy, guys. Maybe I'll do that soon. What do you guys want to imagine the look on Chris Paul's face when I pick Pirates of the Caribbean? He can be such a curmudgeon about genre movies. That's why I like to hit him with those every now and again. Thanks, Boom. Really appreciate that. Deborah Stars, BB, you're right. Nothing can stop what's coming, which is the Great Awakening. Our birthright is peace. It is the natural state of man in the awakened state. It is this the deep state fears. Thank you, Deborah. And thank you, everybody. If you watch on replay, again, throw a boost over if you want. I'll get to that next week. My guest next week is going to be, for the first time, our own Jonathan Drake, maker of awesome pipes, smoker of pipe weed, and host of the No Treason podcast, which is on before this show. We will probably do something related to that. The Trump Doctrine sets us up really nicely for that. So look forward to Jonathan Drake's narrative debut next Sunday night. That should be fun. And yeah, I just want to thank you guys. Thanks for the support. Please hit the thumbs up button. It's been a little tough lately. You know, Badlands, you guys have seen all the bullshit out there. There's some stuff going on with me that I could talk about it. A lot of people are really open about talking about whatever the fuck they're doing to other people on various podcasts. But yeah, it's been rough. You know, I got a 11-month-old crawling around, and I don't like not talking about things that are going on with me. I'm a very, as you guys can tell, direct person. I prefer direct confrontation. There's a reason that this year felt pretty tense at Badlands, and we've talked about a lot of that kind of stuff. John put out his video about what he's dealing with, and obviously we're caught up in the gravity of that stuff, right? But John isn't the only one. There, other people have not been spared this stuff. So people are targeting me. They apparently seem very proud of the fact that they are. I believe they are doing so patently illegally. And what I'm going to do is not litigate the stuff in public, and I'm sorry to be broad about it, but you know, there's a lot of people sending me messages and saying, oh, why is this person saying this about you or whatever? Like, well, we're going to find out. So I'm going to deal with everything legally. And yeah, when people show you who you are, you should believe them. But I'm going to protect my family. I'm going to protect myself. And, you know, the really good thing is when you're not a criminal and when you haven't done the things that people very openly and proudly say you have done, you end up in a pretty damn good position. And they end up in a pretty damn bad fucking position. So that's where I'm at. And instead of going back and forth with people online, which is obviously the desire, I'm going to play everything the way I need to play these things. And then I will talk about in detail whatever I need to talk about. And anyway, in the meantime, appreciate you guys supporting us, supporting me. And yeah, the sifting will sort itself out. We're going to get through all of this stuff and probably come out a lot better for it in the aftermath. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons that I hate people who gild themselves in unity, and much worse than I hate the deep state. And I'm not joking about that. So anyway, appreciate that. Appreciate the people who have sent over messages. Appreciate the people who are still supporting us and who didn't just decide to fuck off and tell us to go fuck ourselves in the process over a bunch of provably false bullshit. So anyway, and I know most of you just want to watch the shows and not get involved in drama. Trust me, that's what we want to do too. But people keep coming at us, and we're just going to have to keep responding until it is no longer in their best interest to do so, until it is rendered no longer in their best interest to do so, which is what I plan to do. So we will talk about that when I feel it is appropriate in detail and not before. Steph Asia with One at the Wire. BB, get some ivermectin, horse pace version. Save yourself from colds and flus. Just take a bit each week. It will change your life. I'll send you the link I've used for 5 years. Best of your fam. Thank you. Okay, I got your link here. I have used it before. I've actually gotten this one before that you just sent over. Yeah, I got kind of fucked up this past week, and apparently it seems to be because of Lyme disease. And I know there's all these theories about what Lyme disease is. I don't know what the fuck it is. I just know that I have it, and it's fucked me up for a couple of years. So when I get sick now, apparently it just feels like I'm dying, which may or may not be actually true at times. So I feel a little bit better today. I unfortunately had to take a combination of natural stuff and not natural stuff. But, you know, got to do what I got to do. So anyway, thank you guys. Thanks for watching the show. Please hit the thumbs up button. Please share it throughout the week if you think it's evergreen. Watch the boys on Q after hours. Give them some support as well. And otherwise, I'm going to outro with the intro. As I always say, the war is a story. The story is a war. Act accordingly. I'll see you next week with Jonathan Drake.
We were sleeping. I've been sleeping. I've been turning away from a truth I wanted not to face. There is a wound that won't heal at the center of the galaxy. There is a darkness reaching like rust into everything around us. We let it grow, and now it's here.
How many men have you killed, my lord?
I don't know.
50? 100? Countless.
Countless has a nice ring to it.
And how many lives have you saved?
500,000. Population of King's Landing. Tell me if your precious Randy commanded you to kill your own father and stand by while thousands of men, women, children burned alive, would you have done it? Would you have kept your oath then?
Our time has come to lead the Republic. But you were deceived. You assumed no force could challenge you. And now, finally, we have returned.
The visions are clear now. I see possible futures all at once. Our enemies are all around us. And in so many futures they prevail. But I do.
We have survived by hiding from them, by running from them. But they are the gatekeepers. They are guarding all the doors, they are holding all the keys, which means that sooner or later, someone is going to have to fight them.
I wish none of this had happened.
So do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us.
Forgive me. I did not see. I have failed you all. You fought bravely. Captain Armor, I do not know what strength is in my blood. But I swear to our people. Our people. I wish you good fortune in the wars to come. And now it begins.
No. Now it ends.